My husband adjusted his expensive silk tie and let out a heavy theatrical sigh as he slid a thin piece of paper across our granite kitchen island. He looked me right in the eyes and lied with the practiced ease of a Las Vegas casino executive. He thought he was tossing me a pathetic scrap of his wealth, while he secretly funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars to a young mistress in a luxury penthouse on the Strip. He had no clue that within 3 weeks I would be standing under the crystal chandeliers of the Bellagio ballroom watching federal agents snap heavy steel handcuffs onto his wrists. My name is Harper. I am 34 years old and I run a specialized logistics empire in Nevada. If you have ever smiled through the pain of being underestimated by a toxic partner who viewed you as a disposable prop, please tell me your age in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to Sarah Told Stories because the financial execution you are about to hear is satisfying. It was a Tuesday morning in Henderson. The arid desert heat was already baking the rugged mountains outside, but the air inside our pristine, custom-built home was freezing. Ethan stood on the other side of the marble counter, rubbing his temples to sell his performance of the exhausted, overworked provider. I looked down at the slip of paper resting near my coffee mug. It was a check for $10,000. "It was a rough year in the gaming sector," Ethan murmured, shaking his head slowly. "Tourism took a heavy hit. There was barely any bonus this cycle, so we need to be careful with our spending." He tapped the edge of the paper with his index finger, offering a condescending smirk that made my stomach churn. "Use it for your little shipping project," he added. "Buy some new tires or whatever you need." I stared at the check, feeling the cold marble beneath my fingertips. My little shipping project was actually a sprawling supply chain firm that moved millions of dollars in secure gaming equipment and luxury goods across the state. My personal company generated 10 times his annual corporate salary, yet Ethan desperately craved this exact dynamic. He needed to feel like the dominant king of the castle, granting his quiet wife a generous allowance to keep her busy. For years I had played along to protect his fragile ego, masking my sharp, analytical mind behind a serene domestic smile. I did not argue with him about the glowing quarterly earnings reports for the hospitality sector. I simply picked up the check and folded it with precise, measured movements. "Thank you, Ethan," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. I slipped the uncashed check into the pocket of my blazer. It was a token of his deceit, a quiet piece of evidence I would save for the exact right moment. I poured my dark roast coffee and watched him grab his leather briefcase. He walked out the front door with a noticeable swagger, his chest puffed out in unearned triumph. He firmly believed his fabricated reality was bulletproof. Neither of us knew that 20 miles away, an exhausted senior accountant was sitting down at a crowded desk, preparing to send a routine tax email. A single careless typo was about to fracture Ethan's neon-lit facade and ignite a ruthless financial war. The Nevada sun crested the jagged peaks of the McCullough Range, casting long, sharp shadows across the floor of my home office. Heat radiated through the tinted glass, warming the dark hardwood beneath my bare feet. I sat at my sleek glass desk with a second cup of black coffee resting beside my laptop. My logistics dashboard displayed a dozen transit routes tracking heavy cargo trucks hauling premium casino supplies down the interstate. The steady rhythm of supply and demand usually brought me profound peace. Today, an unexpected notification chime fractured that quiet calm. An email appeared in my personal inbox. The sender was Mitchell, a senior accountant at Ethan's corporate firm. Mitchell was a man perpetually buried under tax season deadlines, functioning on minimal sleep and excessive caffeine. His fatigue caused a fatal clerical error. He meant to send Ethan the finalized financial documents for the fiscal year, but his tired fingers auto-filled my secondary email address in the carbon copy line. I clicked the encrypted attachment. The screen required a password, which I knew was Ethan's predictable combination of his childhood zip code and his college graduation year. The document unlocked, loading a stark white form filled with dense black text. My eyes scanned the rows of standardized boxes, searching for the end-of-year compensation totals. My gaze stopped dead on the bold numbers listed under executive bonuses. $340,000. I leaned closer to the monitor, The digits stared back at me, crisp and undeniable. Just 24 hours ago, my husband stood in our kitchen, rubbing his temples, playing the role of an exhausted provider struggling through a harsh economic downturn. He handed me a paltry check, claiming it was the best his company could offer. The math was stark and brutal. Ethan had successfully concealed $330,000 of liquid cash from his own wife. I did not scream. I did not throw my ceramic coffee mug against the pristine white walls. I simply closed my eyes and let the cool air from the overhead vents wash over my skin. In the silence of my office, my mind drifted back a decade. I remembered the blistering summer I started my business. I was 24 years old, standing in the choking dust of a remote Nevada gold mining town. I owned a single rusting transport truck with a failing transmission and a ledger full of unpaid invoices. The desert was an unforgiving teacher. It taught me that survival required hypervigilance, flawless logistics, and an unwavering commitment to security. I learned to spot vulnerabilities in supply chains before they collapsed. I built my empire by anticipating threats and fortifying weaknesses. I clawed my way out of the dirt to become the chief executive of a specialized transportation network dominating the high-stakes hospitality routes. I opened my eyes, the memory fading into the sharp reality of the present. I spent years applying my obsessive security protocols to my shipping fleet, ensuring every cargo load was tracked and protected. It was time to apply those exact same protocols to my marriage. I shifted my posture, sitting up straight in my ergonomic chair. The betrayed spouse vanished, replaced instantly by the calculating auditor. I opened a secure, encrypted browsing window and bypassed our standard domestic banking application. I accessed the deeper financial portals tied to our joint investment portfolios and shared equity lines. My fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced rhythmic speed, running a silent, meticulous forensic audit of our entire financial history over the past 36 months. The initial sweep revealed a flawless facade. The mortgage payments were punctual, the utility bills were standard. But I knew how to look deeper. I searched for anomalous capital outflows, filtering the data to isolate large, uncharacterized transfers. A specific recurring deduction caught my attention. Every quarter, a substantial sum of money evaporated from a secondary savings account, routed through a complex web of digital payment processors. I traced the digital breadcrumbs following the financial trail until it converged on a single corporate entity. The receiving account belonged to a limited liability company registered under the name Desert Skyline LLC. The name triggered a faint, sickening memory. 3 years ago, Ethan brought me a stack of mundane vendor contracts to review for his casino hospitality division. He claimed he needed my signature as a corporate guarantor to expedite a new supplier relationship. He pitched Desert Skyline LLC as a burgeoning local vendor specializing in premium gaming felts and luxury card tables. I glanced at the paperwork, trusted his judgment, and provided my authorization. I pulled up the archived vendor contract from my digitized records. I stared at the signature line. I had unknowingly authorized a phantom corporation. Desert Skyline LLC produced no gaming tables. It manufactured 0 casino supplies. It was a sophisticated shell company, a hollow corporate entity designed specifically to siphon funds away from our shared marital assets. Ethan weaponized my trust, turning a routine administrative signature into a long-standing money laundering operation right under my nose. My own husband constructed an elaborate financial pipeline to bleed my resources dry. The sheer audacity of his betrayal was breathtaking. He played the supportive partner, feigning interest in my logistics routes and supply chain negotiations, while secretly exploiting my corporate infrastructure. He smiled across the dinner table, drank the wine I purchased, and slept in the bed I provided, all while orchestrating a silent theft. He treated me like a naive mark in a high-stakes grift. I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went, but I also understood the critical importance of digital stealth. If Ethan suspected I was investigating his phantom vendor, he would panic destroy the evidence and likely attempt to drain the remaining joint funds before filing for a hostile divorce. He believed I was entirely consumed by my shipping contracts, too busy managing fleet schedules to notice discrepancies in our domestic ledgers. I needed him to maintain that exact delusion. I initiated a comprehensive digital sweep of my workstation. I wiped the browser history, cleared the cache, and scrubbed the local server logs. I utilized a specialized overwriting program to ensure no trace of the intercepted tax document or the subsequent forensic audit remained on any device tied to our home network. I encrypted the damning evidence, moving the files to an isolated offshore cloud server accessible only through dual-factor biometric authentication. I sat back watching the progress bar reach 100%. The screen refreshed, leaving a pristine, unremarkable desktop. Ethan's financial blueprint was now safely locked in my vault, and he remained entirely oblivious to the breach. A soft chime echoed from the hallway. The front door unlocked, and I heard the familiar sound of Ethan's leather loafers stepping onto the hardwood floor. He returned early from his morning management meeting. "Harper," his voice called out, echoing up the staircase. "Are you in your office?" I closed the financial tabs and brought up a generic shipping manifest. I smoothed the wrinkles from my blouse and let a calm, welcoming expression settle onto my features. "Up here," I replied, my tone even and pleasant. Ethan appeared in the doorway, loosening his silk tie. He offered a charming, practiced smile, stepping into the room and leaning casually against the edge of my glass desk. "Just wanted to check on my favorite CEO," he murmured, reaching out to trace his knuckles along my jawline. "You look stressed. Still dealing with that problematic freight carrier from Reno?" I looked into his eyes, searching for any flicker of guilt or hesitation. There was none. He was a master of his craft, wearing his deceit like a second skin. "Just navigating some unexpected delays," I said, offering a soft sigh. "The supply chain never sleeps, but I am handling it." "You always do," he praised, leaning down to press a gentle kiss to my forehead. "Do not work too late. I was thinking we could order takeout from that new Italian place tonight. My treat." "That sounds wonderful," I replied. I watched him turn and walk back down the hallway, whistling a light tune. He was celebrating his own perceived brilliance, confident in his untouchable status. He thought he was dealing with an overworked, distracted spouse who would gratefully accept a pasta dinner funded by the very money he had not yet managed to steal. He was gravely mistaken. The revelation of the hidden bonus and the Phantom LLC was merely the outer layer of his deception. I knew that $330,000 did not just sit idle in a shell company checking account. Stolen capital required a destination. It funded tangible assets. I needed to map the physical coordinates of Desert Skyline LLC and uncover exactly what my husband was financing in the shadows. The hunt had officially escalated from a digital audit to a real-world tracking operation, and my knives were sharp ready and waiting in the dark. The digital trail of a phantom corporation leaves a very specific kind of footprint if you know exactly where to look. I accessed the Nevada Secretary of State business portal, utilizing the same encrypted skipping trace tools I typically reserved for vetting high-level commercial freight contractors. Cross-referencing tax identification numbers and shell company registrations is a routine practice in global supply chain management. I applied those exact auditing principles to Desert Skyline LLC. The shell company featured a registered agent located in a mundane office park on the outskirts of town, but the actual billing address routed directly to a premium residential property management group. A few secure database queries later, the true destination materialized on my monitor. The money was not flowing into a business warehouse or a legitimate vendor account. It was funneling straight into a luxury penthouse lease situated right on the neon-lit Las Vegas Strip. The authorized occupant listed on the leasing agreement was a woman named Sloan. A quick search through regional hospitality directories provided her professional profile. She was 26 years old, working as a junior casino marketing consultant. Her online presence showcased an ambitious social climber, eager to secure a permanent foothold among the wealthy entertainment elite. The reality of the situation clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Ethan was not merely siphoning capital into a secret savings account for a rainy day. He was actively financing a lavish secondary existence for a woman nearly a decade his junior. He used my grueling hours and my corporate dividends to buy himself a shiny new life. I closed my laptop and grabbed the keys to my heavily tinted sport utility vehicle. The drive from our quiet Henderson estate to the heart of the city provided a stark environmental transition. I left behind the arid, grounding expanse of the Great Basin Desert, navigating toward the pulsing, artificial heart of the entertainment capital. The setting sun painted the rugged mountain ranges in deep shades of violet and bruised orange before the blinding electric glow of the casinos swallowed the horizon. I pulled into a discreet parking structure directly across from the luxury high-rise. My dark vehicle blended seamlessly into the surrounding concrete shadows. Through the privacy glass, I maintained a clear, unobstructed view of the shimmering valet stand. The desert evening carried a stifling heat, but the air conditioning inside my cabin kept my environment incredibly cold. I sat in silence, tapping my fingers against the leather steering wheel. I waited for 40 minutes. Then a sleek silver sports car pulled into the circular driveway. Ethan stepped out, tossing his keys to the attendant with a familiar, arrogant flick of his wrist. He did not look like a man burdened by a rough year in the gaming sector. He walked with a light, energetic bounce in his step. He reached into the passenger seat and retrieved 3 distinct shopping bags. The prominent logos belonged to high-end European designers known for exorbitant price tags. A moment later, the heavy glass doors of the lobby swung open. Sloane emerged wearing a striking emerald cocktail dress that clung tightly to her youthful frame. She rushed forward, throwing her arms around Ethan. He dropped the designer bags onto the pristine pavement and pulled her close, kissing her with a fierce, desperate hunger. It was a display of undeniable passion unfolding right under the dazzling marquee lights. Watching them intertwined beneath the blinding electric glow brought a profound realization. The visual contrast was sickeningly poetic. I represented the harsh, unforgiving bedrock of the Nevada desert. I was the solid foundation that actually sustained life, managing real fleets, negotiating brutal contracts, and generating tangible wealth. Ethan, on the other hand, spent his entire life chasing the flashy, fake, easily unplugged neon lights of the Strip. He craved the superficial glamour and the intoxicating illusion of high-stakes importance without possessing any of the substance required to earn it. He wanted to feel like a titan while spending the money of the woman he secretly despised for being more successful than him. The betrayal struck me with staggering force, but I refused to let the trauma break my composure. A lesser woman might have marched across the street, demanded answers, and filed for divorce the very next morning. I played that exact scenario through my mind and immediately discarded it. The legal reality of my geographic location presented a severe obstacle. Nevada operates under strict community property laws. If I walked into a courtroom and submitted a standard divorce petition, the judge would look at my thriving logistics empire and cleave it right down the middle. Ethan would be legally entitled to 50% of everything I built from the ground up. He would take half of my transport contracts, half of my commercial warehouses, and half of my hard-earned cash reserves. He would use my life work to permanently fund his new existence with Sloane. That outcome was entirely unacceptable. A simple separation was a profound failure. Ethan had to be obliterated in a manner so thorough and public that he would never recover. I needed to trap him in a scenario where the law functioned as my weapon rather than his shield. I put the vehicle in drive and pulled away from the curb, leaving the artificial neon glow shrinking in my rearview mirror. The tears never came. I converted the visceral pain of his infidelity into a sharp, calculated resolve. I would strip him of his pride, his freedom, and his future. I returned to the quiet isolation of our Henderson home and formulated a strategy to keep him docile. The most effective way to blind an arrogant man is to feed his ego while feigning total ignorance. When Ethan finally walked through the front door hours later, he smelled faintly of expensive perfume and premium vodka. He offered a practiced apology, claiming a sudden crisis on the casino floor kept him working late into the evening. I greeted him in the kitchen holding a glossy bridal magazine I had pulled from a dusty bookshelf. I smiled warmly, pouring him a glass of iced water. I told him the recent stress of his job made me realize we needed to focus on celebrating our own milestones. I proposed we host an extravagant 10-year vow renewal. I pitched a lavish event featuring customized floral arrangements, a private catered dinner, and a guest list packed with his most important hospitality colleagues. I painted a picture of a grand celebration that would showcase his success to all his peers. His eyes widened, taking the bait with astonishing ease. The prospect of an expensive party celebrating his status appealed directly to his deepest narcissistic desires. He pulled me into a hug, kissing the top of my head and praising my wonderful idea. He told me I was the best wife a man could ask for. He genuinely believed I was consumed by event planning color palettes and seating charts. The vow renewal was the perfect diversion. It cast a thick veil over my true intentions, granting me the uninterrupted time needed to construct his ruin. I went to sleep that night listening to his steady breathing, forming the next phase of my forensic counterattack. I felt a deep sense of control settling over my racing thoughts. But the following evening, a subtle irregularity on my personal firewall alert system caught my attention. Ethan was not just content with stealing my cash and parading his mistress around town. As I reviewed the internal network logs, I discovered a silent digital intrusion originating from his personal laptop. He was systematically probing the secured folders containing my most sensitive corporate shipping routes. The betrayal was about to cross from domestic theft into full-scale corporate sabotage. The silent hum of the centralized servers in my home office usually brought a sense of structured calm to my late evenings. I designed the network architecture myself, layering localized firewalls over encrypted private tunnels. As the founder of a supply chain empire, navigating the treacherous economic terrain of Nevada requires unyielding vigilance. My logistics firm orchestrates the lifeblood of the Las Vegas Strip. We transport highly sensitive cargo, ranging from perishable, imported delicacies meant for exclusive Michelin star kitchens to secure gaming hardware destined for high-stakes casino floors. A single disruption in my transit schedules costs millions. Therefore, my digital perimeters are fortified with relentless precision. Sitting in the dim glow of my dual monitors, I reviewed an upcoming quarterly manifest. The house was quiet. Ethan had retired to the master suite an hour prior, claiming a sudden migraine brought on by the grueling demands of the hospitality industry. I typed a command to execute a routine diagnostic sweep of our domestic network. A subtle amber notification pulsed in the lower right corner of my primary screen. It was not a loud blaring siren or a disruptive error message. It was a quiet, discreet alert indicating an unauthorized data extraction was actively occurring in real time. My fingers hovered over the mechanical keyboard. I traced the origin of the digital intrusion using a customized monitoring script. The breach was not originating from a foreign syndicate or a rival transportation cartel attempting to steal my proprietary routes. The signal pinpointed an internal Internet Protocol address. The rogue connection led directly to the den down the hallway. Ethan was sitting in the dark, bypassing my secondary security gates using a backdoor password he must have captured by watching my keystrokes over my shoulder. I opened a mirrored terminal to observe his actions without interrupting his session. A chilling sensation washed over my skin as the severity of his theft materialized before my eyes. My husband was systematically downloading my most classified corporate assets. He pulled elite client rosters, negotiated vendor pricing sheets, and highly guarded delivery schedules. These documents represented a decade of grueling labor, endless negotiations, and the livelihoods of 200 dedicated employees who relied on my leadership to feed their families. He was engaging in profound corporate espionage. This was no longer a domestic dispute over a hidden bank account or secret penthouse lease. He intended to hand my irreplaceable business intelligence directly to Sloan. His young mistress was launching a competing marketing firm trying to broker lucrative deals in the tight-knit casino sector. Armed with my proprietary data, she would possess an insurmountable competitive advantage. Ethan planned to cannibalize my life work to finance his flashy secondary existence. It was an act of profound treason. The urge to sever his connection, lock the router, and march down the hallway to demand answers burned hot in my chest. A standard reaction would involve a confrontation filled with raw emotion and shattered trust. I pushed that instinct aside. Confronting him now would merely prompt him to feign ignorance or claim he was printing a document for his own job. I needed irrefutable, undeniable evidence of his intent. I needed a trap that would trigger a spectacular downfall. Instead of blocking his access, I initiated a sophisticated counter-sabotage protocol. I deployed a shadow container around his active download stream. While he believed he was pulling pristine files directly from my master vault, I began altering the data mid-transfer. Moving with swift, calculated keystrokes, I subtly corrupted the spreadsheets. I inflated our vendor pricing margins by 20%. I swapped the contact information for elite casino purchasing directors, replacing their direct lines with the numbers of retired regional managers. I shifted delivery timetables, making the logistics routes appear highly inefficient and costly. I transformed my flawless business blueprints into worthless, toxic garbage. To ensure the trap carried severe legal consequences, I went a step further. I injected a customized tracking algorithm deep into the metadata of every single portable document format and spreadsheet he extracted. It operated as an invisible digital watermark. The moment Sloan attempted to open those files on an external network or forwarded them to a potential investor, my servers would register a legally binding location ping. I was forging an unbreakable chain of forensic evidence. When she tried to leverage my stolen assets, she would unknowingly incriminate herself, holding flagged corporate property. Ethan was sitting down the hall, feeling triumphant, unaware he was downloading a ticking digital time bomb that would obliterate his mistress and her fragile ambitions. The following evening, the oppressive desert heat gave way to a cool, dry breeze. Ethan sat on our limestone patio swirling an expensive bourbon in a crystal glass. He wore a plush robe projecting the image of a weary executive unwinding after a punishing day of corporate warfare. I walked outside, carrying 2 glasses of chilled white wine. The patio lights cast long shadows across the pristine pool, creating a deceptive atmosphere of domestic tranquility. He accepted the wine, offering a tired smile. He leaned back and brought up my transportation fleet. He let out a scoff, shaking his head in feigned amusement. "You treat those trucks like they are hauling nuclear launch codes," he remarked, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Your obsessive security protocols are exhausting, Harper. You need to relax and stop being so paranoid about your little business. The hospitality industry moves fast because we trust our partners. You cannot control every single variable." The sheer irony of his statement tasted sweeter than the wine. He was lecturing me about trust and paranoia while harboring stolen documents on his encrypted hard drive. His profound arrogance blinded him to the reality of his situation. He believed my caution was a character flaw rather than the exact mechanism currently dismantling his future. I offered a serene, unwavering smile. "You are probably right," I replied, keeping my tone light and breezy. "I should focus more on us. Speaking of which, the caterer sent over the preliminary menu for our 10-year vow renewal. I brought out the floral swatches, too. I really want the ballroom to look perfect for your colleagues." I spread the colorful fabric samples across the patio table, along with a thick stack of catering brochures. It was a meticulously crafted diversion, a shiny object designed to hold his attention. Ethan glanced at the swatches, a smug, self-satisfied grin playing on his lips. He nodded along, offering vague suggestions about the appetizers. He believed I was a naive, distracted housewife, entirely consumed by trivial event planning. He thought he possessed total superiority over a clueless spouse. We sat under the vast Nevada sky, maintaining the illusion of a perfect partnership. He drank my wine and planned his exit strategy, while I watched him dig a grave too deep to escape. The evening concluded with gentle embraces and hollow promises of a beautiful future together. He fell asleep that night, secure in his deception. But the rot within his world extended far beyond his own deceitful actions. My husband did not build his empire of lies in isolation. The very next morning, the shrill ring of the doorbell shattered the quiet peace of the house. I walked to the foyer and pulled open the heavy wooden door, expecting a scheduled package delivery. Instead, a fresh storm of profound entitlement waited on my welcome mat. His mother, Carol, and his sister, Natalie, stood on the porch, sporting matching designer sunglasses and expectant smirks. Their sudden, unannounced arrival carried a harsh, demanding energy that would quickly force me to uncover a sickening layer of familial conspiracy. I smiled, greeting them warmly, bracing myself to dive into the darkest corners of their shared betrayal. The air conditioning hummed a steady rhythm through the dark hallways of our Henderson estate. Ethan lay fast asleep in the master bedroom, with his breathing deep and even. He was thoroughly sedated by his own arrogance and the belief that his secret life was untouchable. I stood quietly by his leather briefcase resting on the entryway table. I slipped his silver laptop from the padded compartment and carried it silently into my office. The screen illuminated my face with a harsh, pale glow in the dark room. Installing military-grade spyware requires zero hesitation. I inserted a slim, encrypted drive into the side port of his machine. Ethan always believed his security protocols were impenetrable, but his passwords were laughably weak. A few lines of executing code bypassed his login screen within seconds. The digital gates swung wide open, granting me unrestricted access to his hidden cloud storage. The digital folders were meticulously organized by date and event. I clicked on an album labeled simply as Summer Hospitality. The images that populated my high-resolution monitor delivered a staggering, visceral blow. There were crystal-clear photographs of private yacht parties on the sparkling blue waters of Lake Mead. I saw VIP casino nights bathed in neon light, with tables overflowing with premium chips and imported spirits. Ethan stood at the center of every frame, holding a glass of scotch and playing the billionaire. But the true gut punch waited in a subfolder near the bottom of the screen. I opened a picture taken at a high-end steakhouse on the Strip. Ethan was not alone. His mother Carol and his sister Natalie were seated at the luxurious table, grinning brightly at the camera lens. Sitting right between them, holding a champagne flute and laughing, was Sloane. The 26-year-old mistress was practically glowing in a sleek designer dress. Carol had her arm wrapped tightly around the young woman in a warm, joyful embrace. Natalie wore a striking diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. I recognized the jewelry instantly because I had purchased it for her birthday just 2 months prior. The realization crashed over me with undeniable force. The betrayal was not isolated to my husband. It was a deeply rooted familial conspiracy. Carol and Natalie always criticized my grueling work hours and demanded endless financial handouts from our household. They were active accomplices in this deceit. They viewed me as nothing more than a disposable bank account while openly celebrating the theft of my wealth with the very woman replacing me. They drank champagne funded by my logistics contracts and smiled for the camera without a single ounce of guilt. I closed the laptop and erased all traces of the physical breach, returning the device to his briefcase long before the sun rose over the Nevada desert. The lingering sting of their deception hardened into a profound, impenetrable resolve. I did not have to wait long to test the sheer audacity of my in-laws. Just hours later, the doorbell echoed through the quiet morning house. I opened the heavy front door to find Carol and Natalie standing on my porch. They wore oversized designer sunglasses and carried expensive leather handbags emanating a strong scent of heavy floral perfume. They breezed past me into the foyer without waiting for an invitation, and their heels clicked sharply against the tile floor. I offered a polite, serene smile, gesturing for them to sit at the granite kitchen island. I poured 2 glasses of iced lemon water, playing the gracious host, while studying the enemy sitting inside my home. Carol took a slow sip from her glass and placed it on a stone coaster. She adjusted her silk scarf and looked around my kitchen with a familiar, judgmental gaze. She did not bother with pleasantries. She launched directly into her agenda. Ethan tells me his upcoming casino deals are bringing in spectacular returns, she announced with her voice dripping with unearned pride. Natalie and I were discussing the upcoming holidays. We decided a luxury family vacation to Cabo San Lucas is exactly what this family needs to celebrate his success. We found a stunning beachfront villa. We expect you to handle the booking and the deposits, Harper. After all, Ethan provides so much for this household. It is the least you can do to show some gratitude. The irony was staggering. They were sitting on bar stools I purchased, inside a kitchen I designed, demanding I finance a Mexican getaway to celebrate the fake achievements of a man who was busy draining my accounts. I maintained steady eye contact with Carol. I rested my hands on the marble counter, letting a soft sigh escape my lips. I am afraid a luxury trip to Cabo is not feasible right now, Carol, I replied, keeping my tone professional and detached. My logistics firm is undergoing some intense corporate restructuring. My capital is tied up in securing new supply chain routes for the upcoming quarter. I cannot finance a family vacation at this time. Natalie scoffed loudly, rolling her eyes behind her dark lenses. She crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair. "You are always working, Harper," she complained with a sharp, whiny tone. "You never make time for the people who actually matter. Ethan works just as hard, but he always prioritizes us." Carol shook her head in sheer disgust. "You are a frigid workaholic Harper," she sneered. "You care more about your freight trucks than your own husband. You are lucky Ethan is so patient and forgiving. Most men would never tolerate a wife who acts like a cold, unfeeling machine. You really need to reevaluate your priorities before you push him away for good." I absorbed their venomous insults without a single flinch. The heat of their anger washed over my icy exterior, leaving no mark. I savored the profound dramatic irony pulsing through the room. They were insulting my dedication to the very company that kept them dripping in designer brands. They were praising Ethan for his loyalty, while he was unknowingly wiring stolen money straight into a digital trap I had built for him. Their entire social and financial foundation rested on stolen sand, and they had no idea the unforgiving Nevada desert was preparing to swallow them whole. I offered a final tight smile and told them I had a conference call to attend, politely guiding them toward the front door. I watched their luxury sedan pull out of my driveway, knowing their days of arrogant entitlement were severely numbered. I retreated to the silent sanctuary of my home office and locked the heavy wooden door. The familial confrontation provided the exact emotional detachment I needed for the next phase of my operation. I sat down at my glass desk and opened the secure dashboard linked to the spyware on Ethan's machine. The software tracked every keystroke, every downloaded file, and every deleted draft traversing his hard drive. As I refreshed the surveillance log, a new notification pinged on my screen. Ethan had just saved a new portable document format file to a hidden folder on his desktop. The title of the document sent a sudden chill down my spine. The file was labeled Primary Residence HELOC. My eyes narrowed as I clicked to intercept the drafted paperwork. A home equity line of credit application on a property he did not own. The conflict was about to shift from a painful domestic betrayal into the realm of severe federal crime, and the stakes were about to rise higher than the desert sun. The stark white glow of the computer monitor illuminated my face in the darkened office. My eyes traced the letters of the digital file I had just intercepted from Ethan's hidden server. The portable document format file was labeled Primary Residence HELOC, a home equity line of credit. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, holding steady as a sudden profound chill settled deep within my chest. I double-clicked the icon. The file opened, revealing a dense, standardized banking application from one of the most prominent financial institutions in the country. The property address listed at the very top of the form sent a shockwave of cold clarity through my veins. It was our Henderson estate. This was not just any piece of real estate. I purchased the sprawling desert compound 5 years ago for $1.8 million. I paid for it entirely in liquid cash, using the early profits from my logistics empire. It was a premarital asset legally shielded from his grasp. The estate was my personal sanctuary, featuring towering wrought iron gates, imported Spanish tile, and a vast zero-scape courtyard that blended seamlessly into the arid Nevada landscape. Ethan contributed $0 to the purchase price and paid nothing toward the annual property taxes. Yet, staring back at me on the digital application was his name listed boldly as the primary borrower. He was requesting a staggering $500,000 in liquid equity to be extracted directly from the walls of my home. The sheer mechanics of his scheme required a breathtaking level of deceit. Nevada banking regulations are exceptionally strict regarding property lines of credit. Even in a community property state, a premarital asset remains separate unless explicitly commingled by the original owner. In order to bypass the rigorous title company checks and the bank underwriting process, Ethan had to manipulate the legal ownership records. I scrolled down to the third page of the document, discovering a falsified grant deed. The forged paperwork purported to transfer my exclusive ownership into a joint tenancy, granting him equal legal rights to the estate. I zoomed in on the bottom of the page, focusing on the applicant authorization line. The digital ink displayed a flawless reproduction of my signature. I studied the familiar looping cursive of my first name and the sharp, distinct angles of my last name. The betrayal felt incredibly intimate. I pictured my husband sitting alone in his home office late at night, staring at my old greeting cards or discarded business contracts. He must have spent countless hours practicing the precise movement of my pen, tracing the lines over and over until the forgery became indistinguishable from the real thing. He studied my handwriting, not out of admiration, but to manufacture a weapon designed to destroy me. A signature alone, however, is insufficient to execute a real estate transfer. The state requires a licensed notary public to verify the identity of the signers and witness the execution of the document. I shifted my gaze to the circular blue stamp pressed firmly next to the forged ink. The notary seal belonged to a man named Vincent. I recognized the name immediately. Vincent was a sleazy floor manager who ran the high-stakes poker tables at the casino where Ethan worked. He was a man known for wearing cheap cologne and orchestrating quiet favors for upper management. Ethan leveraged his hospitality connections, utilizing a corrupt casino contact to rubber stamp a fraudulent legal document. Vincent placed his own liberty on the line, likely expecting a generous cash payout once the illicit funds cleared the bank. The exit strategy outlined in the remaining pages of the application was brutally transparent. Ethan needed the $500,000 to hit his personal account by the end of the month. I cross-referenced the disbursement routing numbers and found they matched a commercial checking account registered to Sloan. The puzzle pieces locked together with flawless precision. Sloan required seed capital to officially launch her competing casino marketing firm. Ethan was draining the equity from my premarital sanctuary to finance the very business that would attempt to steal my corporate clients. He planned to pull the cash, route it to his mistress, and then blindside me with divorce papers before the lending institution initiated their routine annual audits. He intended to walk away from the marriage flush with stolen wealth, leaving me stranded in a bureaucratic nightmare fighting a formidable bank over a $500,000 fraudulent debt. He wanted to strip me of my resources, my sanctuary, and my dignity, all in one swift motion. His confidence in this spectacular heist stemmed directly from the illusion I had carefully cultivated over the past few days. Ethan genuinely believed my entire focus was consumed by the extravagant 10-year vow renewal I proposed. He saw me reviewing floral swatches, catering menus, and guest lists. He watched me manage my grueling supply chain contracts and assumed my immense workload rendered me blind to domestic paperwork. He thought his wife was a naive, distracted workaholic who would never bother to check the county property records until it was far too late. His towering arrogance shielded him from his own glaring vulnerabilities. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, letting the silence of the room envelop me. My heart turned to pure ice. There were no tears threatening to spill over my eyelashes. The sorrow and heartbreak that typically accompany marital infidelity had evaporated entirely. The man I married was dead to me. In his place stood a hostile adversary actively trying to dismantle my life. I did not panic. I did not rush down the hallway to confront him with the printed evidence. A confrontation would only result in a chaotic domestic dispute. He would deny the forgery, hire a defense attorney, and tie my assets up in endless family court litigation. I required a resolution that offered profound, undeniable finality. I looked at the logo of the banking institution printed on the loan application. It was a nationally recognized lender fully insured by the federal government. Ethan thought he was playing a clever game of local deception, but his greed pushed him across a very dangerous boundary. By transmitting a forged document to a federally insured bank in an attempt to extract funds, he escalated his deceit into the realm of severe white-collar crime. The moment he submitted that application, he violated Title 18 of the United States Code. He committed federal bank fraud and wire fraud. He unknowingly handed me the exact federal rope I needed to hang him. The sheer gravity of his mistake filled me with a cold, calculating energy. This was no longer a matter for a standard divorce lawyer. The situation demanded a legal fortification so robust that it would withstand any counterattack he might attempt. If I wanted to trap him inside his own fraudulent scheme, I needed to sever my legal connection to the Henderson estate before the bank finalized his loan. I needed to become a financial ghost, holding zero assets on paper while retaining total control in the shadows. The transition from betrayed spouse to corporate executioner was now complete. I closed the encrypted file and locked my computer terminal. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out toward the distant neon glow of the Las Vegas Strip illuminating the night sky. The flashy artificial lights represented everything Ethan valued. He thought he could outsmart the bedrock of the desert, but the desert always wins. I needed an elite legal maneuver to secure my empire and ensure his upcoming collision with the federal justice system was inescapable. I needed a shark capable of building an irrevocable fortress around my wealth, and the very next morning I knew exactly who I was going to call. The morning sun battered the tinted windows of my sport utility vehicle as I merged onto the busy highway, heading straight for the towering high-rises of the Las Vegas financial district. I bypassed the standard family law clinics scattered across the suburban neighborhoods. A conventional divorce attorney would look at my situation and suggest mediation or a standard asset division protocol. They would file a standard petition warning my husband of the impending legal battle. That predictable route offered Ethan a chance to hire defense counsel, hide his stolen money, and drag me through years of grueling courtroom litigation. I required a predator, not a mediator. I parked in an underground garage and rode a private elevator up to the top floor of a sleek, modern commercial building. The metal doors slid open to reveal a minimalist reception area devoid of warm colors or welcoming decor. This was the domain of Quinn. Quinn is a formidable corporate litigator who specializes exclusively in white-collar financial crimes and hostile asset recovery. She built her reputation dismantling fraudulent shell companies and recovering stolen capital for massive hospitality syndicates. She operates with a cold, clinical efficiency that terrifies opposing counsel. A silent assistant escorted me into a sprawling corner office. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a dizzying panoramic view of the neon-lit strip stretching out below us. The artificial playground where Ethan spent his days chasing status looked incredibly small from this elevation. Quinn sat behind a polished steel desk wearing an immaculate tailored suit that projected unyielding authority. She did not offer a comforting hug or ask about my emotional state. She merely gestured toward a leather chair opposite her position. I retrieved the encrypted digital tablet from my briefcase and placed it on the cool metal surface between us. I displayed the intercepted home equity line of credit application. I showed her the falsified grant deed, the fake notary seal provided by the sleazy casino floor manager, and the pristine forgery of my signature. I then swiped to the next screen, revealing the offshore routing numbers tied to Sloan and her proposed marketing venture. Quinn leaned forward, studying the glowing screen with intense dark eyes. A sharp, calculating smile slowly altered her stoic expression. She recognized the precise, tactical blunder my husband had committed. She leaned back, steepling her fingers together, and delivered a devastatingly clear legal assessment. She explained that if I confronted him today, the matter would remain trapped in a chaotic local jurisdiction. A local judge might freeze the accounts, but the process would be messy and exhausting. However, by utilizing a federally insured lending institution to extract $500,000, Ethan had elevated his deceit far beyond domestic theft. He was preparing to commit severe bank fraud under Title 18 of the United States Code. The strategy she proposed was a masterclass in legal fortification. We were not going to stop the fraudulent loan application. We were going to trap it. Quinn suggested establishing a specialized irrevocable blind trust. This specific legal entity functions as an impenetrable financial vault managed entirely by a neutral third-party fiduciary. Once an asset transfers into the trust, the original owner relinquishes all direct control and paper ownership. The trust becomes a separate, federally protected organism. Quinn explained the brutal mechanics of the snare. We needed to transfer the deed to my Henderson estate, along with 100% of my corporate logistics equity, straight into this protected shell before the bank finalized his loan. On paper, I would instantly become a financial ghost. I would own zero real estate and zero business assets. When Ethan eventually filed his surprise divorce papers, hoping to claim half of my wealth under Nevada community property laws, his sleazy lawyer would find empty pockets and zero leverage. More importantly, Quinn detailed the trap waiting for his trapper. The moment Ethan transmitted his fake application across the banking network, he would not be attempting to steal from his distracted wife. He would unknowingly launch a cyber assault against a federally protected trust. The lending institution would inevitably flag the discrepancy between his forged grant deed and the newly recorded trust ownership. The federal authorities would swoop down with terrifying speed. I gave Quinn the immediate authorization to draft the paperwork. For the next 3 hours, the glass-walled office transformed into a high-stakes war room. Her paralegals rushed in and out, carrying thick stacks of heavy legal parchment. We systematically dismantled my visible empire. We executed a quitclaim deed, erasing my name from the residential property records. We restructured my supply chain corporation, assigning every single share to the newly minted fiduciary holding. We swept my liquid capital from local checking accounts and routed the funds into heavily fortified offshore accounts managed by the trust. The physical act of signing the documents brought a profound psychological transformation. Quinn slid a sleek fountain pen across the steel desk. The pen felt heavy, grounding my racing thoughts. I pressed the nib to the thick paper and signed my true, legally binding signature, line after line, page after page. With every stroke of ink, I shed the lingering vulnerability of a betrayed spouse. The woman who tried to accommodate a fragile male ego vanished into the sterile air of the law firm. I morphed into an untouchable corporate titan, securing a perimeter no grifter could ever breach. Quinn gathered the final stack of signed documents and placed them into a secure, fireproof lockbox. She looked across the desk, her eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. She confirmed the county clerk would record the new deed within the hour. The corporate restructuring would hit the state registry by the end of the business day. My financial vanishing act was a total, undeniable success. I stood up and smoothed the wrinkles from my tailored blazer. I looked out the towering glass windows at the sprawling desert city below. Ethan believed he was orchestrating the ultimate heist. He thought he could strip my resources to buy his young mistress a penthouse and launch her competing business. He genuinely considered himself the smartest player at the table. He failed to comprehend that I owned the entire board. When he finally attempted to strike the killing blow, bringing down the hammer of his forged loan, he would shatter every bone in his hand against a wall of solid legal steel. I shook Quinn by the hand, finalizing our ruthless pact. The legal architecture was flawless, but the physical trap required one final delicate maneuver. Ethan still possessed the forged paperwork, waiting for my supposed signature on the final authorization page. I could not simply let him submit the document with his own fake version of my handwriting. To guarantee his federal indictment held zero loopholes, I needed to give him a piece of evidence that would irrefutably prove his coercion. I needed to walk back into the lion den, return to our Henderson kitchen, and secure his downfall directly from his own hands. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt remarkably brief. My mind raced through the intricate logistical steps required for the upcoming evening. Returning to the house meant I had to face the man who was actively conspiring to ruin my life without betraying a single hint of the devastation I had just arranged. I needed to pour his wine, ask about his day, and pretend my biggest concern was finalizing the catering menu for a fake vow renewal. Every smile I offered him would be a calculated weapon. Every gentle touch would serve as a diversionary tactic. I slid into the driver's seat of my vehicle, gripping the leather steering wheel tightly. The engine roared to life, echoing off the concrete walls of the underground structure. The path forward was illuminated by cold, hard facts. My logistics empire was safe. My premarital sanctuary was fortified. The snare was armed and waiting in the shadows. All that remained was guiding my arrogant husband toward the tripwire. I put the car in drive and accelerated toward the exit, merging back into the blinding desert sunlight, ready to play the ultimate game of psychological deception. The morning sun cast long shadows across the granite island in my kitchen. I stood by the espresso machine, listening to the rhythmic drip of dark roasted coffee into my ceramic mug. Today was the day the psychological warfare reached its zenith. I wore a tailored cream blouse and a dark pencil skirt, projecting the image of a busy executive preparing for endless board meetings. Ethan strolled into the room looking like a man who had already conquered the world. He wore his favorite charcoal suit and a silk tie he reserved for closing major hospitality deals. His confidence radiated through the air, but I could spot the microscopic cracks in his facade. He carried a thick stack of printed pages under his left arm. He set his leather briefcase near the doorway and walked toward me, offering a bright, practiced smile. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, wrapping one arm around my waist and pressing a soft kiss to my cheek. I leaned into his touch, playing the role of the devoted spouse. "Good morning, Ethan. You look sharp today. Big presentation at the casino." He chuckled a low sound designed to convey relaxed assurance. "Just a standard vendor review," he replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "Oh, before I forget, my accountant sent over the final tax disclosures for our joint filings. I need your initials on a few pages so we avoid any late penalties." He slid the stack of papers across the cool stone surface. The top sheet displayed a generic tax preparation logo. It was a brilliant piece of camouflage. He relied on the tedious nature of financial bureaucracy to dull my senses. He expected me to skim the headers and sign blindly to get the chore out of the way. I knew the truth hidden beneath those mundane cover letters. Tucked securely near the bottom of the pile was the final authorization document for a $500,000 loan against a property I no longer legally owned. I picked up the stack, feeling the heavy weight of the premium paper. I flipped through the first few pages, nodding slowly. I reached the fourth page and paused, simulating an executive reviewing dull tax codes. Ethan shifted his weight from his left foot to his right. He shoved his hands deep into his pockets, trying to hide a subtle tremor in his fingers. The air in the kitchen grew incredibly thick. Then the shrill ringtone of my cellular phone shattered the quiet morning. The device rested on the counter between us. The glowing screen displayed an incoming caller identification from a prominent national lending institution. It was the exact federal bank processing Ethan's forged application. All the blood drained instantly from my husband's face. His tan complexion turned a sickly shade of ash. His eyes darted from the ringing phone to my face and back again. The terror radiating from his rigid posture was palpable. The bank was calling to perform a routine identity verification check before dispersing the funds. If I answered and asked why a loan officer was contacting me, his entire fraudulent empire would incinerate right there in our kitchen. He stood frozen, terrified that a single phone conversation would send him straight to a concrete cell. I picked up the device and pressed the green icon, bringing the speaker to my ear. "Good morning, this is Harper Smith," I answered, projecting a crisp professional tone. "Ms. Smith," the voice on the other end began, polite and formal. "This is a courtesy verification call regarding the recent home equity line of credit application submitted under your name. We just need to confirm you are reviewing the final authorization documents today." Ethan stopped breathing. His jaw clenched tight enough to crack his teeth. He stared at me with wide, panicked eyes, waiting for the inevitable explosion. I looked directly at him, holding his terrified gaze. I allowed a soft, reassuring smile to touch my lips. "Yes, I am holding the final disclosures right now," I told the banker. "I am reviewing the signature pages as we speak. Everything appears to be in perfect order." "Excellent," the banker replied, oblivious to the lethal game unfolding in my home. "Once those signed documents are received and processed, the requested funds will be dispersed into your designated account. Have a wonderful day, Ms. Smith." I ended the call and placed the phone face down on the marble counter. Ethan let out a shaky, exhaled breath, his shoulders sagging with profound relief. His brain rapidly rationalized the conversation. He assumed the bank representative used vague terminology and that I mistakenly believed the call pertained to routine corporate credit lines for my logistics fleet. He thought his sheer luck had saved him from total disaster. He wiped a microscopic bead of sweat from his forehead and forced a strained laugh. "Those bankers never stop calling, do they?" Ethan joked, his voice pitching slightly higher than normal. "Always verifying every little detail." I picked up the stack of papers once more. "You know how financial institutions operate," I replied smoothly. "They have to protect their assets." He eagerly pulled a heavy silver pen from his breast pocket and handed it to me. He pointed a trembling finger at the bottom of the final page. "Just right there on the highlighted line," he instructed. I gripped the cool metal barrel of the pen. Years ago, my corporate security team hired a former intelligence officer to train my executives in advanced threat mitigation. One of the crucial lessons involved executing a duress signature. It is a highly specific, flawed version of your own handwriting designed exclusively for fraudulent contracts or coerced agreements. You alter the mechanical flow of the letters, leaving breadcrumbs for a forensic examiner to find later. I pressed the ink to the paper. I deliberately changed the sharp angle of my first initial. I disconnected the fluid loop of my last name, breaking the cursive sequence in a way I never naturally would. I applied an uneven, heavy pressure, dragging the nib slightly across the grain of the paper. To the untrained eye, it looked like a hurried signature from a busy chief executive officer. To a certified federal document examiner, it would immediately register as a forced, legally provable forgery. I capped the pen and handed the documents back. "Done," I said. Ethan snatched the paperwork from my hand with a speed that betrayed his lingering anxiety. He checked the bottom line, verifying the dark blue ink. A victorious smirk broke through his nervous facade. He believed he had just legally stolen $500,000. He thought he outsmarted a logistics titan using nothing but a stack of tax forms and a sleazy notary contact. "Thank you, Harper," he murmured, stepping forward to plant a firm kiss on my lips. "I will drop these off with the accountant on my way to the casino. Have a great day at the office." He grabbed his leather briefcase and marched out the front door. The heavy oak panels clicked shut behind him. I listened to the engine of his sports car roar to life and fade away down the quiet suburban street. The house settled into a profound stillness. I walked into my private study and locked the door. The time for passive observation had ended. Ethan had officially transmitted a forged signature to a federally insured lending institution, crossing the threshold into severe white-collar crime. I opened my encrypted laptop and initiated a secure video conference. My first call was to a contact at the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. I had established a rapport with their regional director years prior during a complex audit of a rogue freight contractor. I utilized my secure merchant codes to bypass the standard reporting queues. I informed the federal agent that an unauthorized user was actively moving stolen capital through a compromised domestic channel. I provided the specific routing numbers tied to the fraudulent loan application and detailed the exact destination account belonging to Sloan's fake marketing firm. The agent took the information with stark seriousness. He informed me that since the stolen funds were crossing state banking lines, the transaction constituted severe wire fraud. I explicitly requested that they do not halt the impending transfer. I wanted the money to land directly in the mistress's lap. I instructed the agency to flag the transaction, utilizing the transfer as a honeypot to trace the entire money laundering operation. The trap was now a federally monitored surveillance grid. My second call targeted the Nevada Gaming Commission. Ethan was a licensed executive operating within the highly regulated casino industry. Sloan was a hospitality consultant attempting to broker deals on the Las Vegas Strip using embezzled funds. The Commission maintains draconian rules regarding the financial integrity of anyone conducting business within their jurisdiction. I provided an anonymous tip outlining a sophisticated embezzlement ring utilizing illegal capital to fund a new vendor operation within the gaming sector. The regulatory authorities initiated an immediate silent probe. They placed digital tracking algorithms on every single dollar associated with Ethan and his young mistress. The federal snare was officially armed, and the countdown to their mutual destruction had commenced. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, looking out the window at the distant, rugged mountains. The legal framework was flawless. Ethan was trapped in a cage made of his own greed. However, a crucial element remained unsecured. While my husband had provided ample evidence to ensure his own lengthy prison sentence, Sloan remained a potential wild card. She could easily claim ignorance, feigning she thought the startup capital was a legitimate gift from a wealthy boyfriend. I needed to eliminate any possibility of her playing the naive victim. To guarantee the federal prosecutors dragged her into the grand jury indictment alongside Ethan, I required undeniable audio proof of her active complicity. I needed her to confess that she knew the money was stolen from me. Securing that confession meant stepping out of the shadows and infiltrating her glamorous, superficial world. I closed my laptop and prepared to venture deep into the heart of the Las Vegas Strip, ready to orchestrate an encounter the young mistress would never see coming. The digital surveillance grid I placed over Ethan provided real-time updates with chilling accuracy. My tablet illuminated the dark interior of my parked vehicle, displaying a pulsating blue dot on a highly detailed map of the Las Vegas Strip. The tracking software embedded in his laptop synced perfectly with the cloud accounts he shared with his young mistress. Analyzing her digital footprint took less than 20 minutes. Sloan adhered to a strict, deeply predictable schedule funded entirely by my unauthorized capital. Every Thursday morning, she indulged in a premium wellness retreat at a towering 5-star resort known for its draconian privacy policies and exorbitant prices. She felt untouchable behind those gilded doors. I needed undeniable proof of her active complicity. If the federal prosecutors were going to drag her into the grand jury indictment alongside my husband, I required hard audio evidence demonstrating her explicit knowledge of the bank fraud. A simple affair is a domestic issue, but knowingly accepting stolen equity from a forged document constitutes a federal conspiracy. I stepped out of my vehicle, leaving the sweltering pavement behind, and entered the lavish resort lobby. I dressed for the role of a silent predator operating in high society. I wore a tailored ivory linen suit paired with a subtle but incredibly expensive vintage watch. My hair was styled in a sleek, effortless knot, projecting the aura of a woman possessing formidable generational wealth. Tucked discreetly inside the folds of my leather tote bag was a high-definition recording device. The microphone was optimized to filter out ambient noise, capturing pristine vocal frequencies within a 10-foot radius. The spa reception area smelled heavily of crushed eucalyptus and blooming jasmine. Soft ambient music masked the quiet murmurs of the elite clientele. I bypassed the standard treatment lines, utilizing my corporate concierge status to secure immediate access to the private thermal lounges. The attendant guided me through a series of dimly lit corridors lined with imported slate and cascading water features. I spotted Sloane almost immediately. She reclined on a curved, heated stone lounger positioned near the edge of a quiet hydrotherapy pool. She wore a designer swimsuit, reading a glossy fashion magazine, while sipping a vibrant green detox juice. She looked exactly as she did in the hidden photographs, youthful, ambitious, and radiating a toxic entitlement. I selected the vacant stone lounger directly adjacent to hers, adjusting my plush white robe with practiced leisure. For 10 minutes, I remained silent, observing my target. She scrolled through her social media feeds, applying various digital filters to a selfie she had just taken in the mirror. I needed to bridge the gap naturally. I waited for her to signal a passing attendant requesting a fresh towel. When the attendant departed, I offered a polite, polished smile. "The service here is impeccable," I noted, keeping my tone conversational and relaxed. "I usually fly out to Sedona for these retreats, but I am considering relocating some of my investment portfolios to Nevada. The hospitality sector here is fascinating." Sloane lowered her phone, her dark eyes scanning my ivory linen suit and the rare watch resting on my wrist. She possessed the sharp, calculating gaze of a social climber constantly evaluating the net worth of everyone in her proximity. She recognized the subtle markers of genuine affluence and immediately sat up straighter, tossing her dark hair over her shoulder. "Las Vegas is the only place to be," she replied, flashing a bright, eager smile. "The market is exploding right now, if you know the right people. What kind of portfolios do you manage?" "I play the role of an independent angel investor," I explained, smoothly opening my tote bag to ensure the hidden microphone captured every syllable. "I specialize in providing seed capital for fresh, innovative startups, specifically within the casino and hospitality marketing spaces. I am always searching for driven entrepreneurs who just need a financial push to disrupt the industry." Greed is a remarkably predictable emotion. The moment the word seed capital left my lips, Sloane transformed. Her posture shifted, leaning eagerly across the narrow space separating our loungers. She saw an opportunity to secure even more wealth, an easy mark she could manipulate to build her empire. She extended her manicured hand, introducing herself with unearned bravado. We shook hands, and the psychological chess match commenced. Sloane wasted no time diving into a rehearsed pitch. She boasted about a groundbreaking casino marketing firm she was preparing to launch, claiming she held exclusive contacts within the most lucrative gaming syndicates. She spoke in glittering buzzwords, describing VIP experiences and high-roller retention strategies. I listened attentively, nodding in all the right places, feeding her immense narcissism. "Your vision is certainly ambitious," I murmured, taking a slow sip of my cucumber-infused water. However, launching a firm of that magnitude requires substantial initial capitalization. Most young founders struggle to secure the necessary commercial leases and operating funds. Are you currently seeking outside investors to cover your overhead? Sloane let out a bright, condescending laugh, waving her hand dismissively. "Oh, I already have my primary funding secured," she bragged, her voice echoing slightly over the quiet bubbling of the hydrotherapy pool. "My boyfriend is a top-tier executive at one of the largest resort conglomerates in the city. He manages massive portfolios. He is fully capitalizing the launch next month." I raised an eyebrow, projecting a mixture of impressed curiosity and mild skepticism. "That is a rather formidable personal commitment," I countered softly. "Real estate and payroll on the Strip demand incredible liquidity. Is he liquidating his own stock options to back your venture?" The trap was set wide open. Sloane, eager to prove her dominance and validate her status, leaped directly into the snare. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper as if sharing a delightful piece of gossip with a new, wealthy friend. "He is actually extracting the equity from an oversized estate out in Henderson," she confessed, a smug, victorious smirk playing on her lips. "It is a brilliant maneuver. He is legally married to this clueless workaholic who spends all her time managing shipping trucks. She pays zero attention to domestic paperwork. He drafted a home equity line of credit for $500,000 to buy me a penthouse and fund the business." I kept my facial expression perfectly composed, letting the recording device absorb her damning admission. "That sounds legally complicated," I observed, maintaining a neutral, inquisitive tone. "Property laws in this state are notoriously rigid. Surely a bank requires the primary homeowner to authorize an equity extraction of that scale." Sloane rolled her eyes, taking a sip of her green juice. "That is the best part," she chuckled. "He just bypassed her entirely. He forged her signature on the grant deed and the loan application. He even used a shady notary from his casino floor to stamp the paperwork. The bank approved the transfer this morning. The cash clears by Friday. The moment the funds hit my commercial account, he is filing for divorce and serving her the papers. She will never even see it coming until the money is already gone." The confession was pristine. She explicitly detailed the forgery, the corrupt notary, and the impending fraudulent wire transfer. She confirmed her active role as the willing recipient of stolen federal funds. She was a documented co-conspirator in severe bank fraud. I had everything I needed to ensure she faced a federal judge. I prepared to conclude the conversation and exit the facility, but the universe offered a sudden, staggering revelation. Sloane's phone buzzed loudly against the stone lounger. She glanced at the screen and her entire demeanor shifted. The calculating, greedy persona vanished, replaced by genuine, giddy affection. She quickly typed a response, her thumbs flying across the glass screen. "Is your executive boyfriend keeping tabs on you?" I teased, gently probing the sudden change in her behavior. Sloane looked up, her dark eyes glittering with malicious delight. She locked her phone and let out a soft, devious sigh. "Actually, no," she whispered, leaning in closer. "You seem like a woman who appreciates a brilliant strategy. Can I tell you a secret? I am exceptionally good at keeping secrets, I promised." She glanced around the quiet lounge, ensuring no attendants were within earshot. "Ethan is just the bank," she confessed, her voice dripping with sheer ruthless manipulation. "He thinks he is leaving his boring wife to build this glamorous life with me. He thinks he is the mastermind, but he is an absolute fool." She opened her digital wallet and proudly displayed a photograph on her screen. It showed Sloane locked in a passionate embrace with a rugged, heavily tattooed man standing in the VIP booth of a famous nightclub. "That is my real fiancé," she bragged, pointing to the man in the photo. "He is a prominent club promoter here in Vegas. We have been secretly engaged for 6 months. Ethan is draining his wife's estate to launch my firm and buy that penthouse. The second the deed is recorded in my name and the business accounts are funded, I am changing the locks. My fiancé and I are taking the business and the property. We are going to bleed Ethan completely dry and cut him loose. He will be left with no wife, no house, and no money. He is the most gullible mark I have ever played." The revelation struck me like a physical shockwave. The plot twist was a masterpiece of poetic devastation. Ethan, my arrogant husband, who believed he was a criminal genius executing the perfect heist, was nothing more than a pathetic pawn. He destroyed his marriage, committed federal felonies, and risked a decade in prison, all for a woman who was actively conning him. He was burning down his own life to finance the wedding of a nightclub promoter. The irony was so profound, it bordered on cinematic. I stared at Sloane, absorbing the sheer magnitude of her treachery. She was a predator feeding on a parasite. I let a warm, genuine smile spread across my face. "That is a remarkably bold strategy," I told her, keeping my voice perfectly steady. "You are certainly playing a very high-stakes game. It requires a tremendous amount of nerve to juggle federal bank funds and a secret engagement." "You have to be ruthless to survive in this city," Sloane replied, tossing her magazine onto the side table. "The weak get eaten, and the smart take everything." "I could not agree more," I murmured, standing up from the heated stone lounger. I secured my robe and picked up my leather tote bag, ensuring the recording device was safely deactivated and saved to the encrypted cloud. I looked down at the young woman who thought she held the entire world in the palm of her hand. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Sloane," I said, offering a polite nod. "I wish you the exact future you deserve." She beamed, unaware that her future now consisted of a concrete cell and a federal indictment. I turned my back on her and walked gracefully out of the thermal lounge. The scent of jasmine and eucalyptus faded as I exited the spa, stepping back into the sweltering heat of the Nevada afternoon. I climbed into the driver's seat of my vehicle, retrieving the hidden device from my bag. I pressed play on the audio file, listening to the crisp, clear playback of her malicious confession. Ethan was a criminal and a fool. He had handed me the federal rope to hang him, and Sloane had just gleefully tied the noose around her own neck. The evidence was irrefutable. The trap was locked. It was time to return home, pack my husband's bags for his upcoming fake retreat, and prepare to unleash a desert storm that would permanently obliterate their neon-lit illusion. The evening air carried a dry chill as Ethan tossed a heavy leather garment bag into the trunk of his luxury sedan. He walked back toward the front porch, stepping with the exaggerated caution of a man maintaining a complex, multi-layered charade. He wore a heavy wool overcoat, projecting the image of someone bracing for the snowy mountain climate of northern Nevada. He stopped near the threshold, offering a parting smile designed to convey total reliability and domestic devotion. He told me he was heading north for the mandatory casino executives retreat in Lake Tahoe. He claimed the summit would occupy the entire weekend, filled with high-level board meetings, compliance seminars, and networking dinners with senior resort directors. He kissed my cheek, lingering for a fraction of a second to gauge my reaction. He reminded me to finalize the catering arrangements for our 10-year vow renewal, assuring me he would return home by Sunday evening, just in time to review the final floral options. I looked into his eyes, seeing only the reflection of his own towering arrogance. I smiled warmly and wished him a productive trip, telling him to focus entirely on his professional obligations. I watched him slide behind the steering wheel and shift the vehicle into gear. The twin taillights illuminated the dark asphalt as he pulled away from the curb, accelerating down the suburban street. The exact second his car vanished around the corner, the artificial warmth completely vanished from my expression. I stood on the porch, feeling the crisp desert breeze wash over my skin. The final phase of the operational strike had officially commenced. I walked back into the house and picked up my encrypted mobile phone. I dialed a secure direct number connecting instantly to Quinn. We coordinated an immediate, confidential briefing at a neutral location off the main boulevard. Within 30 minutes, I was seated across from my corporate attorney in a private basement conference room, shielded from digital surveillance. 2 federal agents sat beside her, representing the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division and the Nevada Gaming Commission. The lead investigator opened a secure digital ledger on his laptop and turned the screen toward my position. He pointed to a highlighted line of text detailing a major financial movement. He confirmed that the fraudulent $500,000 home equity line of credit had officially cleared the banking system. The funds left the escrow account, crossed state banking lines, and landed directly in the corporate checking account registered to Sloane's marketing firm. The technical parameters required for federal jurisdiction had been fully satisfied. The moment those funds crossed state lines, the domestic dispute transformed permanently into a federal felony. The investigator tapped a computer key generating official documentation. He confirmed that both federal agencies had formally secured immediate arrest warrants for Ethan and Sloane. The charges included wire fraud, bank fraud, and corporate espionage. The The legal noose was completely tightened. All that remained was executing the warrants in a manner that provided absolute zero escape routes. I thanked the federal team and exited the subterranean office. The sun had dipped entirely below the horizon, casting the neon lights of the Las Vegas Strip into brilliant overdrive. I drove my sport utility vehicle toward the heart of the entertainment capital, parking near an exclusive designer boutique tucked inside a luxury resort. The boutique interior featured minimalist white walls, polished chrome displays, and soft classical music playing quietly in the background. A dedicated personal stylist rushed forward, offering immediate assistance. I bypassed the standard racks of executive attire and evening wear. I walked straight toward the section displaying high-end formal garments. My hand brushed past silk fabrics and velvet textures until my fingers stopped on a specific hanger. It was a breathtaking, unapologetic crimson silk gown. The design was sleek and dramatic, featuring a structured bodice, a clean neckline, and a high slit that cut sharply through the rich red fabric. It was not a dress selected for a loving wife attending a renewal celebration. It was a garment tailored specifically for a corporate executioner stepping onto a battlefield. I stepped into the private fitting room and slipped the silk over my shoulders. The garment hugged my frame with absolute mathematical perfection. It radiated an undeniable aura of power, control, and total dominance. I paid for the piece in physical cash, refusing to leave a digital credit card trail that Ethan might somehow monitor through shared auxiliary portals. I returned to my vehicle and drove back to the Henderson estate. The house was wonderfully quiet. I carried the garment bag upstairs and laid the crimson silk gown carefully across the guest bed. I walked into my private home office and opened my secure laptop. The final piece of the tactical puzzle required absolute digital perfection. I connected a specialized secure tablet to my encrypted server. I began loading the comprehensive digital dossier that would dismantle my husband's fake universe piece by piece. First, I uploaded the certified forensic document analysis, proving the handwriting on the HELOC application was a deliberate, actionable forgery. Next, I integrated the verified corporate ledger entries, tracking the unauthorized movement of capital from my logistics accounts straight into Trey's fraudulent restaurant accounts and Sloan's marketing enterprise. Finally, I embedded the pristine audio file capturing Sloan's spa confession, where she bragged about draining my estate equity while secretly planning to betray Ethan with her real fiancé. The tablet screen illuminated the dark room, glowing with a steady, unyielding light. Every financial ledger, every forged signature, and every spoken confession was safely secured behind military-grade firewalls. I ejected the device and slipped it into my leather briefcase. I walked to the window, looking out toward the distant, glittering lights of the Las Vegas Strip. The desert storm was fully formed, hanging heavy and dark in the upper atmosphere. The pressure had reached its absolute peak. Tomorrow night, the Bellagio Ballroom would host a grand red carpet gala, celebrating a fake corporate launch funded by stolen capital. Ethan would stand among the elite, glowing with unearned triumph, entirely convinced he had outsmarted a quiet logistics executive. He had no idea he was walking directly into the center of a federal trap. The background character was finished playing defense. The executioner was ready to take the board. The towering fountains of the Bellagio danced in the sweltering desert night, executing a synchronized aquatic ballet for the tourists gathered on the bustling Las Vegas sidewalks. I bypassed the crowded pedestrian walkways and steered my vehicle directly into the subterranean VIP parking structure. Leaving the oppressive heat behind, I stepped into the climate-controlled sanctuary of the resort. I did not enter through the main casino floor, where flashing slot machines and ringing bells created an endless, chaotic symphony. Instead, I navigated the hushed, exclusive corridors leading to the premium convention center. The heavy crimson silk of my gown brushed softly against the imported carpet with every step. The fabric felt cool and grounding against my skin. I carried my secure digital tablet inside a sleek black leather clutch, holding the undeniable proof of federal bank fraud, wire fraud, and corporate espionage. The long hallway culminated at a set of towering mahogany doors, flanked by thick velvet ropes and a formidable private security detail. Two broad-shouldered men in dark tailored suits stood guarding the entrance, checking names on a digital roster. A polished brass sign positioned near the velvet rope announced the grand launch gala for an elite new casino marketing firm. The security guards held up their hands, requesting an invitation as I approached. I did not bother offering a polite explanation or fabricating a story. I reached into my clutch and retrieved my Platinum Tier vendor access card. As the chief executive of the primary logistics firm supplying this exact resort, I possessed unrestricted clearance to every single commercial sector within the building. The senior security supervisor recognized the distinctive insignia on the card. He knew my transit fleet delivered the imported truffles for their Michelin star restaurants and transported the secure gaming equipment for their high-limit tables. He did not ask a single question. He simply unhooked the velvet rope and pulled the heavy mahogany door open, granting me unobstructed entry into the epicenter of my husband's fraudulent universe. I stepped over the threshold and absorbed the sheer, breathtaking scale of the deception. The ballroom was a cavernous monument to stolen wealth. Enormous crystal chandeliers hung from the soaring ceiling, casting a warm, golden light over the gathering. Waiters in crisp white uniforms circulated through the dense crowd carrying silver trays loaded with premium champagne and expensive caviar. A live jazz quartet played a smooth, sophisticated melody in the corner. The room overflowed with the most influential power brokers and wealthy hospitality investors in the city. I scanned the opulent space, projecting a terrifying calm. My eyes moved past the venture capitalists and social media influencers until I located the primary targets holding court right in the center of the room. Ethan stood there, bathed in unearned admiration. He wore a bespoke tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders with flawless precision. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch, laughing loudly at a joke delivered by a prominent casino director. He radiated an intense, intoxicating confidence. He genuinely believed his grand exit strategy had succeeded. In his mind, the forged home equity loan had cleared the bank, the funds were secured, and his dull, logistics-obsessed wife was sitting safely at home, finalizing catering menus for a meaningless vow renewal. He felt like an untouchable titan, conquering the neon-lit entertainment capital. Standing right beside him was Sloane. The young mistress wore a shimmering silver designer gown funded entirely by my premarital estate equity. She leaned into Ethan, whispering in his ear and smiling brightly for a roaming event photographer. She was playing the role of the brilliant emerging founder, soaking in the praise of the industry veterans she planned to deceive. Hovering just a few feet away were my in-laws. Carol and Natalie stood near a towering floral arrangement, gripping their champagne flutes like trophies. They had spent their entire lives complaining about their unremarkable middle-class roots, desperately thirsting for elite social validation. Tonight, they were finally tasting that coveted status. Carol wore a gaudy diamond necklace she could never afford on her own, while Natalie nodded along to a conversation with a wealthy real estate developer. They were actively celebrating a lavish lifestyle built entirely on my stolen sand. I stepped deeper into the ballroom. The striking blood-red hue of my silk dress served as a visual siren in a sea of conservative black and silver evening wear. I did not rush. I walked with a slow, deliberate cadence. The wealthy guests standing near the entrance noticed my arrival first. Their conversations faded as they turned to look at the unfamiliar woman commanding the room with effortless, lethal grace. The crowd naturally parted before me, creating a clear, unobstructed pathway across the polished dance floor. The shifting energy in the room eventually caught Ethan's attention. He was mid-sentence, raising his scotch glass to emphasize a point, when his gaze swept across the parting crowd and landed directly on my crimson gown. The transformation was instantaneous and physically jarring. The arrogant, triumphant smile vanished from his face, as if it had been struck by lightning. The healthy tan complexion he cultivated on the golf course drained away, leaving his skin a sickly ashen gray. His jaw slackened. The crystal tumbler in his hand trembled, sending a few drops of amber liquid spilling over the rim and staining his pristine white cuff. He stopped breathing. The illusion of his impenetrable genius shattered right there on the ballroom floor. Carol turned her head to follow her son's horrified stare. Her haughty laughter died in her throat. Her eyes widened in sheer, unfiltered terror. She took a stumbling step backward, bumping into a cocktail table. Natalie froze mid-sip her champagne flute, hovering near her mouth. The heavy diamond bracelet on her wrist caught the chandelier light as her hand began to shake uncontrollable. They recognized the inevitable destruction walking toward them. Sloane noticed the sudden silence gripping her inner circle. She followed their gaze and spotted me standing at the edge of the clearing. The dramatic irony of the moment reached its absolute peak. Sloane did not recognize me as the betrayed spouse whose equity she had just stolen. She recognized me as the affluent angel investor from the resort spa, the woman who had promised to review her business plan. A bright, eager smile spread across her face. She nudged Ethan, oblivious to his crippling panic, and pointed in my direction, clearly eager to introduce her wealthy executive boyfriend to a potential venture capital benefactor. Ethan realized the catastrophic collision of his two worlds was happening in real time. The primal instinct for self-preservation kicked in. He shoved his scotch glass onto a passing waiter's tray and moved rapidly across the room. He forced a stiff, terrifyingly unnatural grin onto his face, hoping to project a facade of pleasant surprise to the surrounding guests. He closed the distance between us with long, hurried strides. He reached me before I could approach the stage. He thrust his hand out, grabbing my upper arm. The heat of his sweating palm seeped through the cool silk of my sleeve. His grip was bruising, a desperate physical demand for compliance. He leaned in close, his expensive cologne mixing with the distinct sharp scent of nervous perspiration. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice trembling with suppressed panic. "You need to leave right now, Harper. Go back to Henderson. I will explain everything tomorrow. Just do not make a scene in front of these investors." I looked down at the hand gripping my arm. I did not raise my voice. I did not pull away with erratic force. I simply shifted my weight, aligning my posture to project unyielding authority. I locked my eyes onto his terrified stare. "You do not dictate my schedule, Ethan," I murmured, keeping my tone frigid and razor-sharp, "and you certainly do not possess the leverage to negotiate." I smoothly rotated my shoulder, breaking his desperate hold with effortless precision. He stumbled forward slightly, his hand grasping at empty air. He stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom, entirely paralyzed by the crushing realization that he held zero power over the woman he tried to ruin. I stepped around him, leaving his shattered ego behind. The elevated stage situated at the front of the ballroom featured a crystal podium and a professional audio setup. The live jazz quartet performing on the adjacent platform sensed the overwhelming shift in the room's atmosphere. The upright bass player stopped plucking the strings. The saxophone player lowered his instrument. The music faded into a heavy, suffocating silence. I ascended the short wooden staircase, my heels clicking rhythmically against the polished steps. I walked directly to the center of the stage and positioned myself behind the crystal podium. I placed my black leather clutch on the transparent surface, withdrawing the secure digital tablet. I looked out over the sea of faces. 100 of the most influential executives and investors in Nevada stared back at me, waiting in breathless anticipation. I found Ethan standing exactly where I left him. He looked like a hollow shell of a man waiting for the executioner to drop the blade. I reached forward and grasped the cold metal of the microphone. I tapped the heavy steel grate once, sending a sharp, whining burst of feedback echoing through the high-end surround sound speakers. The brief, piercing noise demanded total submission from the audience. The background character had officially taken over the board, and the Desert Storm was finally ready to break. They say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but federal bank fraud has a funny way of crossing state lines. I let the sentence hang in the chilled air of the Bellagio ballroom. The acoustics of the crystal microphone carried my voice with pristine, terrifying clarity. 100 of Nevada's most prominent investors, casino executives, and social media influencers stopped breathing. The silence was total. The ambient hum of the lavish gala evaporated, leaving only the faint clinking of ice against crystal as trembling hands struggled to hold their expensive drinks. I shifted my gaze, finding Sloane standing near the front row. Her shimmering silver dress suddenly looked cheap under the harsh glare of the stage spotlights. I offered her a slow, predatory smile, holding her terrified stare. "I want to personally congratulate Sloane on the launch of her groundbreaking marketing firm." I continued, keeping my tone conversational, yet lethal. It is incredibly easy to build a hospitality empire when you leverage stolen federal funds and utilize poisoned corporate data. Did you really think those logistics routes and elite client lists you downloaded from my home server were legitimate? I corrupted every single spreadsheet before your boyfriend even transferred them. You built your entire business model on toxic flagged intelligence. Before she could process the magnitude of her ruined enterprise, I tapped the glass screen of my secure digital tablet. The prearranged signal bypassed the venue control board. Instantly, a 10-foot projection illuminated the pristine white wall directly behind me. The high-definition image bathed the entire room in a harsh, unforgiving light, drawing every eye in the building. The first document displayed was Mitchell's misdirected email, showcasing the finalized wage and tax statement. I directed the crowd to look at the staggering executive bonus figure glowing on the wall, $340,000. I explained how the man they had been praising all evening had meticulously concealed this wealth, funneling it into a phantom shell company while lecturing me about rough economic downturns and handing me a $10,000 allowance. I swiped my finger across the tablet. The screen transitioned to the hidden photographs. Crisp images of the luxury penthouse on the Strip filled the wall. The audience stared at the undeniable visual evidence of Ethan funding a lavish secondary life. Murmurs of disgust rippled through the wealthy crowd. Infidelity is a common vice in this city, but I needed to demonstrate the severe legal jeopardy threatening everyone in the room. I swiped the screen again, bringing up the home equity line of credit application. The forged document hovered over us 50 times its normal size, casting a pale glow over Ethan's pale face. I pointed toward the bottom of the projected application, highlighting the signature line. I detailed the intricate mechanics of a duress signature. I explained to the captivated audience how a certified forensic document examiner analyzes the pressure mapping of digital ink. I pointed out the deliberate structural flaws I had embedded in my own name, the disconnected loop, the altered baseline angle. I announced that the signature on the document was a legally provable forgery. I informed the room that Ethan had utilized a corrupt casino floor manager to stamp a fake notary seal, attempting to extract $500,000 from a premarital estate owned entirely by an irrevocable blind trust. By transmitting that document to a federally insured lending institution, he had committed severe bank fraud. The wealthy venture capitalists in the front row physically recoiled, taking distinct steps backward. They recognized the mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines associated with Title 18 violations. They realized they were holding champagne glasses inside an active federal crime scene. Ethan stood paralyzed, his skin a sickly translucent gray. He opened his mouth to mount a defense, but his vocal cords refused to function. His unearned arrogance was extinguished, leaving behind a hollow, terrified shell. I was not finished. I tapped the final file on my tablet, initiating the audio playback. The surround sound system crackled to life, broadcasting the crystal-clear recording captured at the exclusive resort spa. Sloane's smug, haughty voice echoed through the cavernous ballroom, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers. The entire venue listened as she gleefully bragged about draining a clueless wife's estate equity to fund her marketing firm and purchase a penthouse. The sheer lack of remorse in her recorded tone made several guests gasp in revulsion. Then the audio reached the ultimate payload. The recording continued playing her hushed, conspiratorial whisper. The crowd heard Sloane explicitly confess that Ethan was just a gullible mark. She proudly announced her secret engagement to a prominent nightclub promoter, detailing her grand scheme to bleed my husband dry before changing the locks on the penthouse and cutting him loose. She called him a fool. The audio file ended with a sharp digital click, returning the ballroom to a suffocating silence. I looked down at Ethan. The psychological devastation unfolding across his face was a masterpiece of poetic justice. His jaw trembled, his eyes darted frantically, searching for a reality that no longer existed. The man who thought he was a criminal mastermind, a brilliant manipulator orchestrating the perfect heist, suddenly realized he was the victim of a spectacularly pathetic con. He had destroyed his marriage, committed multiple federal felonies, and risked decades in a penitentiary, all to finance the lavish lifestyle of a woman who despised him. The crushing weight of his monumental stupidity physically folded him. His knees buckled slightly, forcing him to grab the edge of a high-top cocktail table just to remain standing. He stared at Sloane, his chest heaving with rapid, shallow breaths. Carol and Natalie experienced their own catastrophic reality check. The matriarch who had demanded luxury vacations and insulted my work ethic could not process the total annihilation of her social standing. Her elite country club peers were staring at her with unabashed disgust, holding up their smartphones to record the humiliation. The glamorous foundation she worshipped was incinerated. Carol clutched her chest, her gaudy diamond necklace sparkling mockingly under the chandelier light, and collapsed heavily into a plush velvet chair. Natalie sank down beside her, weeping hysterically into her hands, attempting to hide her face from the flashing cameras. Their unearned prestige was eradicated. They were now the relatives of a disgraced felon. Sloane attempted to flee the blast radius. She turned toward the exit, her silver designer dress catching the light, but the throng of wealthy investors formed an impenetrable human wall. No one wanted to aid a documented fraudster. The venture capitalists and hospitality executives closed ranks, trapping her in the center of the room, surrounded by hostile, glaring faces. She clutched her designer purse, looking around like a cornered animal, realizing her lucrative career in Las Vegas was permanently finished. I stood on the elevated stage, projecting the unyielding authority of an apex predator. I had dismantled the parasite who tried to drain my empire, exposing every layer of his deceit to the very people he desperately wanted to impress. The public execution was flawless. The neon-lit illusion was reduced to ashes scattered across the imported carpet. I felt no pity for the man gasping for air near the cocktail table. I felt only the cold, crisp satisfaction of a perfectly balanced ledger. However, the social carnage was merely the prelude. The legal architecture I had constructed with Quinn required a final physical manifestation. The heavy mahogany doors at the back of the venue remained closed, but the flashing red and blue lights reflecting through the frosted glass signaled the inevitable arrival of a much darker storm. Ethan opened his mouth to formulate a desperate defense. His lips moved in a frantic rhythm, but his vocal cords failed to produce a single sound. The undeniable reality of his exposure had paralyzed his cognitive functions. Before he could summon a pathetic excuse to offer the stunned crowd, a deafening crash echoed from the rear of the opulent ballroom. The heavy mahogany doors burst inward, swinging wide upon their brass hinges with a force that severed the suffocating tension in the room. Standing in the threshold was Bradley. As the chief executive officer of the resort conglomerate hosting this gala, Bradley controlled every inch of the property. He was also the primary beneficiary of my logistics empire, relying on my secure freight lines to transport millions of dollars in gaming equipment and premium hospitality supplies. He surveyed the paralyzed crowd with a stern, unyielding gaze. He caught my eye across the vast expanse of imported marble and delivered a curt, respectful nod, indicating our silent alliance was fully operational. Bradley turned his head and gave a swift hand signal to his private security detail. The uniformed guards moved with practiced efficiency, securing the perimeter and locking the heavy deadbolts. The metallic clack of the locks echoed ominously. No one was leaving this room. Stepping through the secured entrance, a synchronized tactical team flooded the ballroom. Men and women wearing dark windbreakers, bearing the bright yellow insignias of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Nevada Gaming Commission, moved in perfect formation. They did not pause to admire the crystal chandeliers or the flowing champagne fountains. Their boots hit the polished floor with a rhythmic, terrifying cadence, cutting a direct path through the sea of paralyzed investors. The elite attendees parted naturally, shrinking back to avoid any proximity to the incoming federal storm. The blinding flashes of smartphone cameras erupted across the venue. Every social media influencer and curious venture capitalist in the room raised their devices, capturing the unfolding spectacle. The digital shutters clicked in a chaotic symphony, documenting the final moments of a fabricated empire. The lead federal agent, a towering man with a hardened expression, stopped mere inches from my husband. Ethan Smith, the agent, announced, his voice projecting profound authority over the murmuring crowd. "You are under arrest." The agent recited the charges with clinical detachment, allowing the ambient microphones to capture every syllable. Federal bank fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. The words struck Ethan like physical blows. The agent seized his arms, twisting them behind the tailored fabric of his expensive tuxedo. Heavy steel handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists with a sharp, undeniable click. The sound finalized his ruin. The smug, victorious facade my husband had worn for years dissolved into pure, hollow terror. His knees buckled under his own weight, forcing two supporting agents to hold him upright. The crisp lines of his designer suit bunched awkwardly around his shoulders, making him look small and insignificant. He stared up at the stage, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. He was searching for a lifeline, seeking the compliant wife who always paid the bills and solved his problems. He found only a cold executioner standing behind a crystal podium. A secondary squad of agents converged on the opposite side of the dance floor, targeting the young marketing consultant. Sloane realized her impending fate. The woman who had just bragged about stealing my equity shrieked hysterically. She kicked her designer heels against the floor, twisting her torso to escape the firm grasp of a female agent. The delicate silver fabric of her custom gown tore at the shoulder seam, exposing her frantic struggle. "I am innocent," she wailed, tears ruining her meticulous makeup and streaking dark mascara down her cheeks. "I did not know where the money came from. He lied to me. He tricked me." Her protests rang hollow against the backdrop of her own recorded confession playing just moments prior. The wealthy hospitality executive she had desperately sought to impress looked upon her with profound revulsion. They turned their backs, shielding their faces from the disgraced consultant as she was marched forcefully out of the ballroom. Her reputation in the entertainment capital was eradicated in less than 3 minutes. She was no longer an ambitious founder brokering high-stakes deals. She was a documented co-conspirator heading to a concrete holding cell. The extraction of the primary suspects left a gaping void in the center of the room. From the periphery of the terrified crowd, 2 figures stumbled forward. Carol and Natalie pushed past a group of stunned investors, their faces streaked with fresh tears. The matriarch and her entitled daughter abandoned all pretense of high society grace. They rushed toward the elevated stage, tripping over the hem of their own expensive dresses. They stopped at the base of the wooden steps, gazing up at me with panicked, pleading expressions. "Harper, please," Carol sobbed, clasping her trembling hands together in a gesture of desperate prayer. "You have to call them off. Tell your lawyers to stop this right now. It is a terrible misunderstanding. He is your husband. We are your family. We can fix this financial dispute privately. Do not let them put my son in a cage." Natalie nodded frantically, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the harsh stage lights. She just wanted her comfortable, subsidized life back. The reality of losing her primary source of income fueled her hysterical bargaining. "We will give the money back," Harper, Natalie begged her, voice cracking with sheer desperation. "We will make him cancel the penthouse lease. We will make Sloane pay for the damages. Just tell the authorities you authorized the loan. You have so much capital you can make this disappear. Please just sign a paper saying it was a gift." I looked down at my in-laws, registering the raw desperation in their eyes. They were not mourning the loss of a son or a brother. They were mourning the loss of their status. They wept for the canceled luxury vacations, the unpaid designer bills, and the inevitable eviction notices heading their way. They still viewed me as a utility, hoping they could manipulate my emotions to restore their lavish lifestyle. I felt a deep, resounding sense of satisfaction settling in my chest. I reached into the structured folds of my crimson gown and retrieved a thick manila folder I had prepared with Quinn earlier that afternoon. I held the folder over the edge of the stage, letting the stark overhead lighting illuminate the official legal seals stamped across the front cover. I opened my fingers. The heavy envelope dropped through the air, landing at Carol's feet with a dull, resounding thud. "There is no misunderstanding to fix," I stated, keeping my tone frigid and unrelenting. "Inside that folder you will find my finalized divorce filings, along with permanent restraining orders issued by a county judge. You are legally forbidden from contacting me or approaching any of my corporate properties." Carol stared at the envelope on the floor, her breath hitching in her throat. She slowly sank to her knees, her hands hovering over the documents as if they were radiating intense heat. "We have nothing," Carol whispered, her voice barely audible over the remaining murmurs of the crowd. "You cannot just leave us with nothing, Harper. We relied on you." "You left yourselves with nothing," I corrected, pointing a steady finger toward the exit, where Ethan had just vanished. You celebrated a thief. You drank champagne funded by my unseen sacrifices, and you smiled for photos with a woman conspiring to steal my home. Speaking of that home, you should probably know the truth before you try to beg for a place to sleep tonight. The Henderson estate does not belong to me anymore." Natalie wiped her eyes, staring at me in total confusion. Her brow furrowed as her brain struggled to process the legal implication of my words. "What do you mean it does not belong to you?" Natalie asked, her voice shaking. "I executed a quitclaim deed yesterday morning," I explained, delivering the final crushing blow to their parasitic existence. I transferred the property, along with every single share of my logistics firm, into an irrevocable blind trust. On paper, I own 0 assets. Your brother attempted to forge a loan document against a federally protected entity. He did not steal from his wife. He stole from the United States government. He is a convicted felon in the making. And as of this exact second, your entire bloodline is officially cut off forever. I turned my back on their frantic sobbing, leaving them to grapple with the devastating consequences of their own greed. The background character had orchestrated a flawless checkmate, and the board belonged entirely to me. I left the weeping women kneeling on the floor. Their desperate pleas faded into background noise as I directed my focus toward the main exit. The heavy crimson silk of my gown brushed against the imported carpet, a soft rustling sound that cut through the hushed murmurs of the stunned attendees. The throngs of venture capitalists, social media influencers, and hospitality executives naturally parted to create a wide corridor for my departure. Just minutes ago, these same people had clinked crystal glasses with my husband, eager to invest in his fabricated marketing firm. Now, they shrank back into the shadows, averting their eyes, desperate to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of a federal indictment. The intoxicating aroma of premium champagne had soured, replaced by the distinct metallic scent of sheer panic. I navigated the opulent ballroom with deliberate, unhurried steps. Near the towering mahogany doors, the chaos of the raid funneled into a highly organized extraction. The federal agents marched their primary suspect toward the secure service elevators. Ethan stumbled between 2 broad-shouldered investigators. His posture, once rigid with unearned pride, had crumpled into a pathetic slouch. The bespoke tuxedo jacket hung awkwardly over his restrained arms. The heavy steel handcuffs restricted his wrists, pulling the expensive fabric taut and ruining the sharp silhouette he had so carefully curated for his grand debut. Standing adjacent to the exit threshold was Bradley. The chief executive officer of the resort conglomerate possessed a commanding presence, his tailored suit mirroring his formidable reputation in the gaming sector. Bradley was a man who calculated odds and mitigated risks for a living. He understood the fragile ecosystem of the Las Vegas Strip better than anyone. He knew the flashing neon marquees and the bustling casino floors relied entirely on an invisible network of supply chains. Without my fleet of secure transit vehicles delivering imported goods and gaming hardware, his sprawling empire would grind to a halt within days. As I approached the doors, Bradley shifted his stance. He did not offer a wide artificial smile or attempt to initiate trivial conversation. He simply locked eyes with me and delivered a slow, respectful nod. It was a silent, undeniable transaction of power. He recognized that the quiet logistics director he had negotiated contracts with possessed a lethal strategic mind. The nod was an acknowledgement of my newfound sovereignty. I had purged a parasite from his executive roster and secured my own fortress in a single, flawless stroke. I returned the gesture with a subtle tilt of my head, solidifying a professional alliance built on mutual, unspoken respect. I turned my attention back to the extraction team. The lead investigator paused near the threshold, adjusting his grip on Ethan's shoulder to facilitate my approach. The federal agents recognized my role as the primary architect of the sting operation. They granted me the silent courtesy of a final encounter. I stepped directly into Ethan's path, forcing the procession to halt. The physical deterioration of the man standing before me was staggering. The healthy, confident glow he had projected all evening had drained away, leaving his skin a sickly pale gray. Sweat beaded across his forehead, matting his styled hair against his temples. His breathing was rapid and shallow, his chest heaving with every desperate intake of air. He stared at me, his dark eyes wide with a frantic animalistic terror. The manipulative charm he had utilized to fund his secret life was gone. He searched my face for a trace of the compliant, naive spouse he thought he had married. He found only the cold, unyielding gaze of a predator who had successfully cornered her prey. "Harper, please," Ethan rasped, his voice cracking into a dry, breathless whisper. "You have to tell them to stop. I can fix this. I can reverse the transfers. Just give me a chance to explain." His words were hollow, lacking any structural integrity. He was still trying to negotiate from a position of profound weakness, clinging to the delusion that he could talk his way out of a Title 18 violation. He expected me to falter, to display a flicker of pity or hesitation. I did not speak. I maintained my rigid posture, letting the silence stretch between us. The heavy quiet served as a mirror, forcing him to confront the inescapable reality of his ruin. Slowly, I reached into the concealed pocket of my crimson silk gown. My fingers brushed against a crisp, folded piece of paper. I retrieved the item and held it between my thumb and index finger. It was the same slip of paper he had so arrogantly slid across our granite kitchen island 3 weeks ago. I looked at the printed numbers, recalling the exact tone of his voice when he claimed the gaming sector had suffered a rough year. He had handed me this check as a performance of dominance, a meager allowance meant to appease a wife he considered an intellectual inferior. He had told me to use the funds for my little shipping project, deliberately mocking the logistics empire that generated 10 times his annual salary. He had used this paper to maintain his illusion of supremacy while secretly funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars to a young marketing consultant in a hidden penthouse. I stepped into his personal space, closing the final gap between us. The scent of his designer cologne mingled with the unmistakable odor of cold sweat. I held his terrified gaze as I deliberately unfolded the paper. The sum of $10,000 glared under the harsh light of the crystal chandeliers. Ethan looked down at the check, his brow furrowing in a moment of sheer confusion before the devastating realization settled over him. He remembered the morning in the kitchen. He realized I had known about his deceit from the very beginning. Every supportive smile, every catered meal, every discussion about our fake vow renewal had been a calculated maneuver in a prolonged psychological war. I reached out and grasped the lapel of his ruined tuxedo jacket. Using my free hand, I slipped the crisp check directly into his breast pocket, patting the fabric smooth with a gentle, meticulous motion. The gesture was intimate, mimicking the actions of a dutiful wife sending her husband off to work. The poetic justice burned with a cold, brilliant clarity. "For your commissary account," I whispered, my voice dropping to a smooth, lethal register that only he could hear. The impact of the statement shattered whatever fragile composure he had left. A raw, agonizing sob tore through his throat. Tears spilled over his lower lashes, carving wet tracks down his pale cheeks. He finally understood the absolute finality of his situation. He was not returning to a luxury high-rise. He was not launching a prestigious marketing firm. He was heading to a concrete federal holding cell, and the meager allowance he had used to mock my success was now his only financial lifeline. I stepped back, removing myself from his proximity. I offered no further explanation. The lead investigator gave a sharp command, and the tactical team resumed their march. They dragged my weeping husband through the heavy mahogany doors and into the sterile service corridor, his pathetic sobs echoing against the hard walls until the heavy portal clicked shut behind him. I turned my back on the empty doorway. The ballroom behind me remained trapped in a stunned, breathless hush, the elite guests still processing the sheer magnitude of the takedown. I did not look over my shoulder. I glided across the remaining expanse of the venue, my heels clicking a steady, victorious cadence. I exited the convention center and traversed the sprawling resort lobby. The late-night tourists, oblivious to the federal raid that had just transpired, parted to make way for the striking woman in the crimson gown. I pushed through the outer glass doors, stepping onto the bustling sidewalk of the Las Vegas Strip. The arid Nevada heat hit my face, a stark contrast to the artificially chilled air of the casino. The dazzling neon lights of the surrounding mega-resorts flashed against the dark sky, painting the pavement in vibrant shades of magenta and electric blue. It was a chaotic, artificial paradise built on deception and fragile promises. But beyond the towering hotels, out in the vast, stretching darkness, lay the rugged Great Basin Desert, the unyielding bedrock that demanded respect and punished the weak. I inhaled the dry desert air, feeling a profound sense of liberation expand within my chest. Ethan had tried to build a kingdom on stolen sand, utilizing forged signatures and phantom shell companies. My cold, calculated storm had swept through the valley, washing away his fake empire and leaving nothing but the hard, undeniable truth in its wake. The hunt was over, the threat was neutralized, and the foundation of my future remained securely intact. All that remained was the quiet task of surveying the final damage when the sun rose over the mountains. I walked toward my waiting vehicle, ready to face the dawn. 6 months later, the relentless Nevada sun beat down upon the Las Vegas Valley, baking the rugged terrain into a cracked, arid expanse. I stood behind the floor-to-ceiling glass of my newly acquired executive suite, shielded from the blistering triple-digit heat by a silent climate control system. The panoramic view offered an unobstructed sightline of the sprawling city below. Far beyond the artificial glimmer of the tourist corridor, my fleet of heavy transport trucks moved along the interstate like vital arteries, pumping life into the desert economy. The dust from the catastrophic collapse had finally settled, leaving a pristine, unobstructed horizon in its wake. The federal justice system operates with a slow, grinding certainty that crushes anyone caught within its gears. Ethan discovered this grim reality during his initial arraignment. He attempted to hire a high-profile defense attorney, but his frozen accounts and ruined credit score severely limited his options. He was forced to rely on an overworked public defender who took one glance at the forged home equity application, the traced offshore wire transfers, and the sworn affidavits before advising him to surrender. Facing the staggering conviction rates of the Department of Justice, Ethan accepted a binding plea agreement. The man who once craved bespoke Italian suits and premium bourbon now resides in a federal penitentiary. He wears a standard-issue uniform and adheres to a strict, unyielding schedule dictated by prison guards. His sentence carries a mandatory minimum without the possibility of early parole. His corporate career is a permanent casualty, leaving him with nothing but concrete walls and endless hours to reflect on his fatal miscalculations. Sloan encountered an equally devastating fate. Her grand vision of launching an elite casino marketing firm disintegrated the moment she attempted to access the stolen logistics routes. The digital tracking algorithms I embedded deep within the corrupted supply chain data functioned flawlessly. When she tried to present those files to a prospective investor, the hidden code triggered a silent alert to federal cybercrime divisions. She was caught holding flagged proprietary intelligence, resulting in secondary indictments for corporate espionage. Drowning in severe legal fees and facing her own upcoming sentencing hearings, she filed for total bankruptcy. The audio recording of her arrogant spa confession became the cornerstone of the prosecution, ensuring she could never play the naive victim. Even the corrupt notary from the casino floor faced his reckoning. Stripped of his state license and fired by the resort management, he is currently awaiting trial for his role in authenticating the fraudulent deed. Yet the most exquisite stroke of poetic justice fell squarely upon my former in-laws. Carol and Natalie had spent years functioning as unapologetic parasites, draining my financial resources while publicly diminishing my tireless work ethic. When the irrevocable blind trust severed their access to my capital, their lavish lifestyle imploded. Without the steady influx of unauthorized cash, they could no longer afford their expensive lease or their premium car payments. The inevitable eviction notices arrived swiftly, forcing them to abandon their gated community. They possessed zero marketable skills and a glaring gap in their employment histories, having relied entirely on the illusion of inherited wealth. Desperation forces individuals into humbling circumstances. Carol and Natalie needed immediate income to secure basic housing. They applied for entry-level positions at a high-volume freight dispatch center located in a bleak industrial sector of North Las Vegas. They accepted the minimum wage roles without realizing the mundane corporate entity listed on their paychecks was a recently acquired subsidiary of my overarching logistics empire. I review their employment performance metrics on a monthly basis. The two women who once sipped champagne on private yachts and demanded luxury vacations to Cabo San Lucas now wear cheap polyester polo shirts. They spend their days sitting under harsh fluorescent lights in a cinder block building surrounded by the overwhelming scent of hot asphalt and diesel fuel. They wear heavy plastic headsets, logging transit schedules, and directing commercial truck drivers through the scorching desert heat. Every grueling shift, they endure every complaint they field, and every minimal paycheck they collect directly fuels the continued expansion of my personal wealth. They are permanently trapped at the very bottom of the corporate ladder, serving the exact logistics industry they once mocked. Their elite social standing is permanently erased, replaced by the exhausting reality of manual administrative labor. Removing the relentless drain of their entitlement provoked an unprecedented financial boom for my enterprise. Without Ethan siphoning capital from my operating accounts, my company experienced a period of explosive, unhindered growth. Our quarterly valuation tripled. We secured 3 enormous international supply chain contracts, dominating the transportation sector across the entire Southwest region. My board of directors recently finalized the acquisition of 2 rival shipping firms, solidifying our status as an untouchable monopoly within the hospitality transit space. The quiet background project Ethan so eagerly dismissed is now the undisputed heavy lifter of the state economy. I turned away from the sweeping desert view and walked toward my polished steel desk. Resting on the pristine surface was a thick stack of freshly printed legal parchment prepared by Quinn. I sat in my ergonomic leather chair, picking up a heavy titanium pen. The documents did not represent a new corporate merger or a real estate acquisition. They outlined the charter for a philanthropic foundation I had spent the last 3 months structuring. I signed the endowment papers establishing a heavily funded legal defense initiative designed specifically to assist women trapped in scenarios of profound financial abuse. The foundation provides victims with immediate access to former federal prosecutors, ruthless forensic auditors, and hostile asset recovery specialists. We supply the tactical legal artillery required to untangle complex financial deceit, break through forged documentation, and secure their rightful independence. I channeled the trauma of my own betrayal into a highly calibrated weapon, ensuring that opportunistic predators facing our legal teams experience the exact same terrifying precision that dismantled my husband. Society often pushes a deeply flawed narrative regarding familial loyalty. We are conditioned to believe that a shared household or a wedding ring demands endless forgiveness and infinite financial subsidies. People will urge you to keep the peace, to swallow the blatant disrespect, and to shrink your own potential to accommodate the fragile egos of insecure partners. They expect successful women to dim their light so the men in their lives can feel the illusion of towering warmth. My journey through the dark underbelly of marital fraud proved that unconditional loyalty is a dangerous myth when handed to people who view you as a utility. True power does not reside in loud emotional confrontations or tearful negotiations. It resides in the silent observation of a threat, the strict enforcement of impenetrable boundaries, and the willingness to respond to betrayal with cold, legally devastating force. You strip away their resources, you fortify your perimeter, and you let the federal statutes do the heavy lifting. I capped the titanium pen, placing it neatly beside the finalized foundation charter. I looked out the window one last time, watching the fading sun cast a brilliant, bruised violet hue across the jagged mountain peaks. Ethan believed he could construct a grand empire, utilizing stolen equity, forged signatures, and a foundation of deceitful promises. He underestimated the environment he tried to conquer. You can never build a lasting kingdom on stolen sand. Eventually, the harsh, relentless Nevada desert sweeps in and reclaims it all. The false rulers are buried under the dust, and the background character ascends the throne as the undisputed king. We frequently examine this spectacular collapse of a life: the courtroom indictments, the shattered marriages, the hollowed-out bank accounts, and wonder where the initial fire started. The truth is, the spark is rarely ignited in adulthood. It is struck decades earlier, in quiet living rooms and manicured suburban kitchens, where the foundation of a person's character is slowly poured. Having witnessed the devastation wrought by entitled partners and their enabling relatives, I find myself reflecting deeply on the true architecture of family responsibility. The wreckage left behind by deceitful spouses and opportunistic siblings does not occur in a vacuum. It is the direct result of a fundamental failure in parenting values. In American culture, we often idolize the concept of the traditional family structure. We picture the picturesque home, the holiday dinners, the unwavering loyalty that is supposed to bind relatives together against the outside world. This idealized version of kinship is marketed as the ultimate sanctuary. But loyalty, when divorced from honesty and fairness, becomes a poisonous inheritance. Think of the mothers and fathers who shield their children from the natural consequences of their actions. They step in to pay off debts, they offer convenient excuses for bad behavior, and they point the finger at external forces whenever their child falters. They believe they are demonstrating profound love. In reality, they are manufacturing predators. Raising a child requires the hard, unforgiving currency of truth. When families prioritize outward success, the country club memberships, the prestigious job titles, the illusion of limitless wealth, over the unglamorous work of building integrity, they set a trap for their own offspring. We live in a society that measures human value by physical accumulation. Parents push their children to climb the corporate ladder, to secure the corner office, to acquire the luxury vehicles that signal arrival. In this frantic race for status, emotional awareness is often discarded as a useless commodity. Children are taught to project confidence rather than cultivate empathy, learning early on that the appearance of a flawless life is far more important than the reality of a moral one. But emotional awareness is the only metric that sustains a human soul when the bank accounts dry up. A child raised without a steadfast commitment to fairness grows into an adult who believes the world owes them an existence. They learn to forge signatures, to siphon funds, and to betray the people who love them, all because they were taught that acquiring the prize is paramount, regardless of how the prize was won. They view partners not as equals but as utilities, stepping stones designed to facilitate their own comfort. This entitlement is not an accident of nature. It is a meticulously crafted product of a household that refused to enforce boundaries. The true burden of family responsibility lies in teaching a child that they are not the center of the universe. It is a harsh lesson, and it requires parents to endure the temporary discomfort of their child's disappointment. Traditional family structures excel at providing safety, but safety can easily rot into complacency if it is not balanced with accountability. When a parent bails out a son's gambling debts or excuses a daughter's cruelty toward a spouse, they are not protecting their child. They are actively disarming them, leaving them entirely unequipped to navigate a reality that does not care about their last name. Consider the long-term guidance required to forge a resilient adult. It does not involve paving a frictionless road. It involves handing the child a shovel and watching them blister their hands. Honesty within a family means having the courage to look at your own flesh and blood and tell them they are wrong. It requires a matriarch or patriarch to value justice over genetic bias. When a family operates on the premise that blood excuses betrayal, they create an echo chamber of narcissism. The adult child walks into the world expecting their spouses, their colleagues, and their friends to offer the same unconditional surrender their parents provided. And when the world inevitably pushes back, when the firm boundaries are drawn and the legal papers are filed, the child shatters, having never developed the emotional fortitude to accept their own flaws. Fairness is not treating everyone exactly the same. It is holding everyone to the same standard of truth. If a household fosters an environment where lies are swept under the rug to maintain a pristine public image, the children learn that optics matter more than morality. They learn to construct intricate facades. They become experts at wearing tailored suits and charming smiles while hollowing out the lives of the people closest to them. The tragedy is that these individuals are often miserable, trapped in a relentless cycle of maintaining an illusion because they were never taught how to build something real. They spend their lives chasing artificial validation, perpetually terrified that someone will look past the designer labels and see the empty space where their character should reside. We must redefine what it means to support our children. Support is not a blank check. Support is a mirror. It is the willingness to reflect a child's flaws back to them with clarity and compassion, guiding them toward course correction before the justice system does it for them. Emotional awareness stems from this exact mirror. A child who is allowed to feel remorse, who is guided to make amends rather than excuses, develops the empathy required to be a genuine partner in a marriage. They learn to value the unseen sacrifices of others because they have been taught the heavy weight of their own actions. If these themes of generational cycles, the pursuit of truth, and the complex realities of human relationships resonate with your own experiences, I invite you to join our ongoing conversation. Share your stories of breaking toxic patterns and establishing firm boundaries in the comments below. Please subscribe to Sarah Told Stories for more narratives that explore the profound depths of resilience, justice, and personal transformation. Your engagement helps us continue shedding light on the hidden dynamics that shape our lives. As we unpack the wreckage of these failed empires, a startling realization emerges about the true nature of upbringing. Society relentlessly conditions us to believe that a parent's primary job is to provide, to ensure our children have more comforts, more opportunities, and more wealth than we did. We measure parental success by the softness of the cushions we place beneath our children's falls. We strive to hand them a life free from the struggles that defined our own youth. But perhaps this is the great cultural deception. The most profound duty of a parent is not to give a child the world, but to purposefully deny them the center of it. We equate love with provision, but the truest, most enduring form of love is the willingness to let a child break, to let them face the biting cold of their own failures without offering a coat. If we refuse to let them taste the bitter ash of consequence in the safety of our homes, they will eventually choke on it in the wild. You cannot forge steel without fire, and you cannot build a soul without suffering. We spend our lives striving to construct impenetrable fortresses for our families, believing that thick walls and overflowing accounts will keep the darkness at bay. We lock the doors, secure the perimeters, and hand our children the keys to the kingdom, trusting that our love will act as an eternal shield. We never stop to consider that by guarding them from every storm, we might be quietly raising the very tempest that will ultimately tear the roof off the house. In the end, as the debris settles and the truth is laid bare, you are left to wonder, when the fortress inevitably crumbles, is it the unforgiving wind that destroys the walls, or the silent rot we carefully planted in the